the CentreSteer podcast, a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners.
Welcome to the CentreSteer podcast, podcast number 141 for December of 2024. CentreSteer is a podcast for Land Rover enthusiasts, hobbyists, and owners around the world. Another year comes to a close. That means it's time for our annual fireside chat with the editor of Rover's magazine, Jeff Aronson. Jeff joins us from the island of Vinyl Haven off the coast of Maine, and we cover the rallies that took place in North America this year, the greater Land Rover community, and even Jaguar's rebranding. Stay tuned for that coming up, and actually it'll be fairly short because the news is a little light this month, and I'm John Costage, and joining me are our fellow owners enthusiasts, Harold, Morgan, and Dixon. We're all here this month. Welcome.
Good day. Thanks for having me.
Full house today.
It is a full house. And thanks to our Patreon and Buy Me Tea subscribers for their continued support. And Patreon supporters receive bonus content, including 10 questions, our Land Rover-oriented question and answer lightning round. There will not be a lightning round this month, but if you are a Patreon supporter and have not already listened to the lightning round questions, this is your opportunity to go back and listen to those. They're only available on Patreon, only for paid members.
But just as a holiday exercise, you're welcome to try to guess what Jeff's answers would be, because we've had him on every holiday, probably known him well enough to make an educated guess.
And also off the website, you can get access and purchase T-shirts, stickers, and even our 100th podcast stickers and shirts are available on the website. Go out and check that out. Especially if you're forced to listen to the podcast and you're wondering what to get your Land Rover person in your family or friend. Give them some podcast swag. All right, now it's time for the North American events calendar. Dixon, how's it looking for North American events?
It's actually looking really thin given all the white stuff that's around outside.
Do you have white stuff up in Canada?
Oh, yeah. Oh, we do.
Oh, nice.
Lucky. We don't even have any in Vermont. Not really.
I'm surprised. Going down to a Christmas party on the weekend, if you want snow, it's between Watertown and Syracuse. It was deep.
Oh.
We're getting a lot of lake effect snow. But we have some up here. North of that, it's thinner, but it's there.
I have a non-Rover friend in Buffalo, and he said it was something like 30 inches on the ground.
Oh, yeah. Buffalo tends to get the worst of it.
Yeah.
Parts of our state are subject to the lake effect as well, and they've been hammered this season thus far.
Yeah, up in Erie.
But in terms of events, if you're into snow, that event it's going to be the Winter Romp on President's Day weekend in February up in Benton, Maine, Waterville, Maine. That's the next really major event that we're going to be looking at. It's a fascinating event. It's a no whiners type of thing. You come prepared. There are more trails and so on up there in the woods that you just don't. There are so many of the traffic jams you may have heard of in the past have disappeared years ago. It's quite the event. And if you register or take a room at the Waterville Grand Hotel and such, it's at reduced rates, $55 or $60 a night, which is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that sells out quickly, though, so you want to make sure you plan in advance.
Oh, yes. The winterromp.me website has all the information you'll need, or in the Ottawa Valley newsletter, it's all there, too. Those are your two prime sites for places for information. The Winter Romp is certainly one of those events that it's worth going to once to experience it.
I definitely agree. And we'll have a link to that in the show notes. And when you were referring to prepare, to having been there a couple times, to prepare for cold, and cold.
And this will be, I believe, the first year without the Big G's super manhole-sized sandwiches.
You are correct. That's a sad time.
Yeah, it is a sad thing.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that plans to deal with Big G's closing down. The owner retired after over 40 years in the business.
He was entitled.
Certainly. Plans are being made to address some of the sandwich shortage issues.
It wasn't just the sandwich that was certainly massive and big. It had a nice place that you could all hang out.
It was the atmosphere. You come for the huge sandwich and you stay for the atmosphere, and you spend the rest of the spend the rest of the week eating that sandwich.
That's true.
You only
That is
need
true.
one, so now they're going to need a source of multiple sandwiches.
Plans are being made. I just haven't seen them yet. And I guess the other thing that's going to be coming up, which probably you know more about than I, John, is the Anarch Steward training for people in Anarch clubs.
Correct. By the time you hear this podcast, it may or may not have made it out to the clubs. I'm not sure what the timing is on letting the clubs know about it. This is a very special, innovative training event. It's going to take place March 26th through the 30th of 2025. It'll take place in Tularosa, New Mexico. It's the Cole Learning Center at the I4WDTA facility, which is the International Four-Wheel Training Alliance. I think I might have missed Four-Wheel Drive Training Alliance. That's it. That will take place there in Tularosa, New Mexico. And Anarch has joined in with those folks to put on this special training. It's stepped down from their normal training, which is quite intensive, where they keep you up for 18 hours and have you do all sorts of skills and recovery type training in a group setting. But it's still going to be intensive, and it's still going to involve a number of things that you're going to learn, including off-road driving and vehicle recovery, medical and emergency first aid, guided trail ride organization, radio and communication skills, and most importantly for Anarch is trail etiquette. We've certainly seen throughout the various events that we've been attending, there seems to be a lack of trail etiquette over the past couple of years. So that's going to be part of this training. The stewards training will involve 30 hours of comprehensive education, challenging participants with intensive physical activities designed to give you skills and understanding and knowledge that you can then take back to your club and allow your individual club members then to learn what you have learned. So it's a train-to-trainer type of event. We're opening up training through January 15th, 2 slots per Anarch member clubs. This training is only going to be available for Anarch member clubs. So if you are a club member of Anarch and you want to attend, talk to your club because there's 2 slots open per club. Now, come January 16th, we're going to open up to all member clubs. So if your 2 slots are not filled, then they're going to be freed up for anybody in any Anarch member club then to attend. And the cost is $750, overall limited to 40 registrants total for the activity. And we've also had our Anarch sponsors, Lucky 8, Rovers North, Atlantic British, Sarah Auto Works, and even JLR has helped out to keep the cost to $750. Because I understand it, this training normally goes for, I think, $2,500. And this will be a 3-day event. So if you want to register for that, you want to talk to your club, your president or contact or whoever is running your club should have received an email or will shortly receive an email from Mike McKeag, president of Anarch, about this training.
That sounds like a steal. And I guess the other thing, I'm not sure if this is an option still, but if your club is not an Anarch club, maybe get them to reach out to Anarch and try to join.
Look at you. We didn't even talk about that ahead of time. You are absolutely correct, sir. Yes, that is right. If you're in North America and your club is not part of Anarch, go ahead and go out to anarch.club. And there's a link to the membership page and how you can then become a member club. There's members and there's member clubs. So yeah, it's membership is typically by club. We prefer it that way.
John, where exactly is this? And how would I get there?
It is in Tularosa, New Mexico. It is a bit far out, especially if you're coming from the East Coast. It's more than 24 hours of actual driving to get there. And we do encourage you to bring your own Land Rover. You can trailer it in, but we do encourage you to bring your own Land Rover. There's a limited number of Rovers that can be shared at the facility. So if you don't bring your own, if you fly in, and you certainly can fly in, we'll give you details on once you register where you can fly into. You will probably end up having to ride with another participant if you don't bring your own Land Rover.
So if you've got a Series 1 like Steve Owen or something, he should have left already.
Yes, that's right. Leave now. If you're in Series 1, leave now.
Leave now, Steve. What's the accommodation situation?
It's basically a camping event. You will need to bring your camping facilities. And of course, make sure you bring appropriate dress for temperatures that can vary by 20 degrees or so. This is going to be March. It's also up in the high desert because the elevation is about 5,000 feet and the air will be a little bit thin. So you're going to need to make sure you hydrate, make sure you have the right clothing for temperature swings. And also, when I was helping to put the website together for the details about dressing appropriately, and this one caught my attention, there are a lot of mesquite trees around, and mesquite thorns will go right through the sole of a regular shoe, flip-flop, croc, and even vehicle tires. Make sure you wear the right footwear.
So none of those 70s tire tread sandals, huh?
That's right. And also, all meals will be provided Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday breakfast only. But you are encouraged to bring beverages, coolers, camp chairs, bedding, and of course your clothing. And it is a primitive tent camping activity. There are a limited number of showers and bathrooms on site.
And a dumpster for your trash.
That is the ANARC Stewards Training. Again, it's only open to ANARC clubs that are members of ANARC, and 2 slots per club up until January 15th, when it will open up to all ANARC club members.
Sounds like a great opportunity to learn some skills.
That's a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, that pricing is amazing. And obviously, hopefully, the 2 people from each club who can attend do, and then you get to have the trainings locally. And that's obviously the best part of it too.
Right. Take it back to your clubs. And we realize that it's far for some folks to attend because if you're coming from the East Coast. But if you can do it, I would recommend it if it interests you. There will be 8 professional instructors there, and names that you may have heard, including our own friend of the podcast, Bill Burke, Chris Cole, Chuck Davis, Chris Nelson, Eric Brown, Sherry Davis, Mike Reed, and Joey Pitts. Are all scheduled to be part of the instructor group.
That's a 5-to-1 student to teacher ratio, which is really pretty good.
Now I'm curious whether there are any nearby Amtrak stations that do the vehicle.
I'm sorry, sir.
I don't think so.
It's the auto train only works the East Coast corridor.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
In fact, any Amtrak, I guess you could take an Amtrak into Colorado somewhere, and then you'd have to rent a car and drive down. You're not taking your vehicle on an Amtrak. Unless your vehicle is a bicycle, then maybe.
For any of those of you who are familiar with atomic history, this is very close to Alamogordo, New Mexico.
Is it still hot? Have they checked it?
That is
Bring your Geiger counters.
Bring your own Geiger counter. That's right. And Roswell's actually a couple hours away. You can also Roswell, New Mexico.
Bring your tinfoil hats too.
Go visit Paul.
All right, shall we move on to the news then?
Sure, why not?
Last month we talked about Jaguar and their copy nothing rebranding. We'll start out again with that this month. As I had mentioned earlier in the podcast, this is a very light month when it comes to news. So I figured we'd start with the Jag rebrand. And the BBC had I thought, a good article that was even-handed. It's entitled, How Jaguar Lost Its Way, long before the polarizing advert. I'll let you, listener, if you want to read the whole thing, we'll have a link to it, of course, in the show notes. In the middle of it, there's a really good historical background of where Jaguar came from and what they meant, especially like in the 60s with their design. But I'm going to read just a couple paragraphs here in the middle that I thought was relevant to the current conversation. And also we learned something new. Here it goes. Under normal circumstances, the debut of a new car might gain a certain amount of attention in motoring magazines and websites, but it would rarely, if ever, get onto the front pages. The company has not said who was behind the teaser ad that went viral, generating more than 3 million views on YouTube. But JLR has been working with Accenture's creative marketing arm, Accenture Song, for 3 years. Accenture has not commented. Branding experts have mixed views about the campaign. And to pause here, yeah, that was news, I thought, hearing that Accenture has been working with them for several years. Going on here, this is a quote from Mark Beaumont, founder of the branding agency Dinosaur, which I don't think was involved. This is just them commenting. What we had was a really bold advertising campaign that has now been followed through seamlessly with a concept car that completely matches the campaign. It is potentially a masterclass in advertising awareness. But Tim Parker, strategy director at Conrad Design Group, thinks it is a risky strategy. Quote, they have indeed copied nothing that has come before in the brand's rich heritage, but at what cost? Few brands ever succeed by alienating their traditional customer base over the longer term, he continued. If the goal is to build relevance in a crowded luxury EV market, the differentiation makes sense, but only if the underlying strategy is coherent. So I thought that was the salient part of that article. They
Copy nothing
yeah.
except perhaps the front end of the Cybertruck.
I've seen a lot of Cybertrucks on flatbed tow trucks around here, and it does differ enough from a Cybertruck, but that's not very hard.
Yeah.
That is the other thing, is that now we've actually seen what the vehicle looks like, or at least the concept vehicle. Last month, we had only seen the advertisement, which sort of didn't give us anything to go on.
I thought they were going to actually show the vehicle that they were coming with. I didn't realize this was just going to be an announcement of the concept. This is really like DC 100 for what they did for Land Rover.
Well, they are a ways off from production, so they may not be ready with the production prototype.
They're supposed to come
a
out
styling exercise.
They're supposed to come out with a new one in a year. They want to debut it, I believe, in the fall or winter of next year.
Right.
It's a very balanced article, I think, and well worth reading. It goes into some of the past, what they're trying to do and where they might be going. It offers a lot of interesting things to make you think about some of the aspects, some positive, some negative.
Yeah, it was interesting to learn that Accenture has been involved with helping them out, because I only know Accenture as this consulting firm in the IT space. Interesting, they're out there helping with marketing too.
Yeah, I think a lot of those large companies at this point they just, like Tata, they have a finger in every pot. It is really a great article covering the history and the recent developments. But one of the things I personally thought was very interesting is the discussion around whether this marketing campaign was a good idea, will turn out to be a good idea, and whether they're alienating customer base, which at this point, I feel like they don't really have a customer base anymore.
Because they alienated them.
It is hard to...
Well, I don't think that they have a customer base because they're trying to change the entire market of the vehicle. They're going so far upmarket with it and being all electric that their traditional customer is not that customer.
And they stopped producing vehicles for the last several years.
Yeah, that doesn't help any either.
Yeah, they were barely selling any vehicles, and now they're definitely not producing any vehicles, which actually feels like the right time to try to rip off the Band-Aid and do something.
I think this is all
amazing.
planned, sir. Yeah. I think they're still making the XK8. I think there's a couple XK8s, but pretty much, they're pretty much done producing.
Yeah.
But I think as this article said, this was a plan and they got what they wanted, which was any sort of awareness that Jaguar is still out there. Whether it was good or bad, whether you like it or not, they got the attention. And that's, I think, what they were after.
As they say in marketing, any attention is good attention to you.
Someone was talking about Jaguar for the first time in however long.
Yeah, and it means that it has spawned articles like this, really good discussions showing the history for those who don't know the history, and then looking at the current state of things and what the vehicle is likely to be. I don't particularly like the overall, the actual design of the concept, but the silhouette, I actually kind of like.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like the silhouette.
Yeah.
It looked like the Batmobile.
Yeah.
It did. An electric Batmobile.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could make a body kit or something to fix the rest.
Oh, there you go. Oh, I'm sure someone will come up with it.
Or just put the development camo back on it.
I know that maybe that's what they should do, is just start doing wraps, development camo wraps, and it'll make it look like it has more style to it.
All right, let's move on to next story. Land Rover, most profitable brand for used car dealers as Discovery Sport offers hefty margins. And this is in the UK. I told you this was a late news month. Land Rover was once again the most profitable brand for used cars in the UK for dealers in November, with the company and the models continuing to offer huge retail margins According to the dealer's auction, latest retail margin monitor shows that on average, dealers made a profit of £3,825 on every Land Rover sold. It's the 21st consecutive month that Land Rover has topped the list, having taken the crown in March of 2023. Of the brand's models, the Disco Sport was the most profitable, average retail margin of £3,525, followed by the Evoque, which had an average of £3,475 in November.
Which is interesting because in this country, the Disco Sport does not sell that well.
Right. If we had a lot of them to sell
Or at
used,
all.
they'd probably sell reasonably well.
Well, yeah, you need to sell some new ones first before you have any used ones in which to sell.
Exactly.
Well,
I am a little curious whether, obviously, Land Rover is a very popular brand in the UK, but I also wonder whether Brexit has had any effect on Land Rovers being more popular on the used market because it maybe is more expensive to get other vehicles. It's just one of those things that I hadn't really thought of until I saw this article. I was like, oh, maybe we've talked about the opposite effects of Brexit, and I just don't know.
That's a good point.
Maybe.
So it's
One
a
of the others.
follow-on of a few years ago when the used car market was way up because they couldn't build any new cars. With Brexit making new cars more expensive in England, it maybe has boosted their used car market.
And BMW was number 2 on this list. They're obviously an import from the EU, so it might be that it's pushing more people to the secondary market.
Certainly, if you have your heart set on a German car, I think you'd want to go used. Let somebody else pay the import tariff on it.
All right, next is a Wired magazine article. To build electric cars, Jaguar Land Rover had to redesign the factory. And it's a very lengthy article. Read a couple interesting points, I thought, from this article. How well is JLR's first all-electric facility? The UK government's zero-emission vehicle mandate, part of its plan to transition to a net zero economy, became effective at the beginning of 2024. 22% of all new car sales must be zero emission. The law has forced the industry to effectively fast-track electric vehicle production up to an effective ban on the sale of new petrol cars by 2035. The EU has similar regulations in place. Each of JLR's luxury marques will have a pure electric model by 2030 with the Range Rover Electric set for production. We'll have more on that in just a few minutes. The plant's final production line is now also 50% longer with 3 kilometers, that's 3.7 miles, to accommodate battery fitting. All electric vehicles will be produced in parallel with JLR plug-in hybrids like the Disco Sport and the Evoque and its internal combustion engines. So they're going to do all 3 in parallel. Traditionally, petrol cars are built around the engine with full vehicle length components, a drive shaft, fuel lines, and exhaust systems. But electric vehicles have a very different build. The battery goes in much later during the production process. Electric drive units go into the front and rear subframes with a larger battery in the middle. That's why we had to expand. This is the quote they're having here. That's why we have to expand our production line, spread the process out, and keep our battery electric vehicles separate. Nearly 1 mile of Howell's paint shop has been modified. The expansion of ovens and conveyors follows growing consumer demand for contrasting color roofs. Curing creates the premium finish. This means the whole paint had to be shut down for 5 weeks over the summer of 2023. Over 1.5 weeks was just for cleanup. The paint environment had to be incredibly clean. You literally need to dust to settle, clean, and then settle again. You want to know more, go read that article. It's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, while it may be a slow month for news, it was a great month for really good in-depth articles.
Yes.
So
Yes.
shout out to BBC and Wired for that.
Yeah. Apparently they gave a tour, I think, of this plant because I saw another article from someone else.
I guess they had more time to work on building good articles because there just weren't as many things to cover.
And next up, Land Rover Defender recalled for raised air intake that could fly off. A number of Land Rover Defenders are now subject to a peculiar recall related to the vehicle's adventure-ready snorkel, according to documents filed with NHTSA. The recall, that's here in the U.S., the recall was filed on December 6th, is for a part number associated with 435 Defender units in the U.S., internally known as VPELP 0543. You know it. The part number is for a raised air intake that can be optioned onto the 90 and the 110. Instead of a traditional engine bay mounted intake, the raised intake funnels air through the A-pillar, allowing serious adventures to plow through dusty, dirty environments with impunity. Officially, the Federal Safety Agency says the air intake can separate from the A-pillar as a result of mismatched fitting tolerances, with the possibility of a complete departure of the air intake, aka snorkel flies off, increasing at high speeds. To remedy this issue, Land Rover will remove the raised intake and install a revised system at no cost to the consumer. Customers who have previously paid to have their raised air intake fixed will be reimbursed. Notably, this part is not an in-house Land Rover piece, but is made by a third-party manufacturer and sold as a vehicle accessory. Land Rover is going to make the whole situation shortly, seeing as a dealer and owner notifications will be complete before the end of January 2025.
That would be annoying if you were on the Paris-Dakar and that flew off. Dusty desert.
Duct tape. Land Rover needs to supply all owners of Defenders with a sticker that says, all parts falling off this vehicle are of the finest British quality.
This is interesting. This is just for this NHTSA, which is in the U.S. I wonder if this is an issue for rest of world, non-U.S. vehicles. They're all made in the same place, so you would think.
I would guess that the answer to that is yes, because Canada usually follows fairly closely after NHTSA, because more cases will appear down in the States than in Canada. So I'm sure that depending on right-hand versus left-hand drive, if it's a problem in the United States, it's going to be a problem in all the other left-hand drive countries.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if there might be a difference between the left-hand drive and right-hand drive versions of the snorkel. I can't imagine there would be, but
maybe. Hard to say.
Yeah, probably would depend on where if it's a Fitbit problem, it might have been just when you put it on the other side of the vehicle, they didn't adjust their equipment appropriately.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem that older Defenders never had. You couldn't go fast enough to have your snorkel fly off.
Well, but you might have shaken the vehicle on its own, just sitting when the engine's on. You give it, you take it away.
It won't
right?
fly very far in that case.
Fair,
and that's when
fair.
the duct tape comes in handy.
Didn't have to worry about dust, though. You weren't going fast.
For sure.
Well, we also had oil bath filters to start. It was more to keep water out.
Yep.
Next up, the ultimate SUV has arrived. What is the identity of this car that has caught the attention of dads? That's at least the title of this article from our friends over in South Korea. So Land Rover is gathering attention by unveiling a limited edition model exclusively for the Korean consumer. It is the Range Rover Morning Calm Edition. This limited edition, based on the brand's top flagship SUV, the Range Rover Long Wheelbase SV, will be produced in only 5 units. They're making 5 of them. The Morning Calm Edition is a design that interprets the beautiful name of Korea. The exterior is eye-catching, harmonious combination of bespoke satin blue and bespoke gold roof color. Chrome and gold surround details add to the vehicle's sophistication. 23-inch diamond finish wheels, silver metal 2-piece grille, and the SV welcome lighting are also involved. Top quality semi-aniline seat with contrast stitching. The sun rising over the East Sea is embroidered on the back of the seat. The Range Rover Morning Calm Edition combines a 4.4-liter V8 twin-turbo engine and a 48-volt mild hybrid system, 8-speed automatic transmission, all-wheel drive, produce a maximum output of 615 horsepower. That's available in Korea. Only 5 of them. No cost was available.
if you have to ask, you can't afford.
Oh, there's the gold top. I was looking at the pictures there. You can barely tell in this picture. There's the gold top, light contrast roof. That's the morning calm. You feel calm in the morning looking at that? I can't say that I do. Maybe in Korea, maybe things are different.
I'm falling asleep now looking at it.
Every time I hear Morning Calm Edition, I think it's an NPR news program.
Right.
And next up, the big news, I think, for this month is Unstoppable. The new electric Range Rover conquers desert heat in stunning test run. Normally, car manufacturers like to test their new models covered in what looks like cardboard boxes or more patterns than a 90s rave poster. Not Land Rover. The company unofficially revealed its new electric Range Rover ahead of the official review, showing photos of the SUV showcasing its off-road prowess on Arabian sand dunes. Land Rover says this monster EV outperforms combustion-engined off-roaders in hot, dry desert conditions. The latest testing for the Range Rover Electric has taken place in the heart of the desert, and in particular, quote-unquote, Big Red, looming over the other saffron-colored dunes. This natural 300-foot dune formation is Dubai's greatest desert hill climb. The purpose of raging an electric rangy over this sort of terrain in temperatures of 50 degrees Celsius and up to 90% humidity is to ensure the drivetrain is reliably temperature controlled and built to support longevity and optimum range. The Range Rover Electric has a new intelligent torque management system that gives the wheel slip management task directly to each individual electric drive control unit. The result is cutting the torque reaction time at each wheel from around 100 milliseconds to as little as 1 millisecond. Useful when the prototype was tasked with tackling the ascent of Big Red 5 times without showing any reduction in performance. The Range Rover Electric is also fitted with a new thermal management system, which intelligently controls heat distribution around the vehicle. There's no further details on that. Thomas Mueller, Executive Director of Product Engineering, says the Range Rover EV performed well in such extreme conditions. The addition of challenge of driving on sand dunes requires controlled low-speed torque, so our specifically developed traction control system and thermal management system works in harmony to ensure power delivery is unaffected, he explained. Our tests have shown that in this climate, repeatedly driving the equivalent of 100 meters uphill on fine sand, Range Rover Electric matches the performance of its ICE equivalents, in some instances even surpassing them, thanks to the introduction of these new features. The Range Rover has already been tested in the rigorous cold temperatures of the Arctic Circle to make sure the batteries don't lose their power. As the pictures of the all-black prototype show, the Range Rover Electric doesn't have any major redesign, staying true to the design language of its combustion engine versions. Currently, the gas Range Rover starts at $107,900 US, so you can expect the new Range Rover Electric to be priced well above $100,000 when it starts arriving at dealers in the US. Range Rover says it will be taking customer orders over for its new EV in 2025. Actually, they're already they have reservations, I think, for the EV. They just haven't taken any orders. But that's your all-electric Range Rover.
And definitely go look at the pictures because they are excellent.
They are really good. I wonder who took those. I'm pretty sure it was Nick Nimbleby. It doesn't say, but they don't credit him, but it does look like that's the case.
Yeah, and I just love how that sort of fake side vent, it's actually a sort of a silver gray color, but on the desert sand, it looks like it's a gold band. Just looks amazing.
It's reflecting that saffron colored sand.
Yeah.
I think it does look pretty good. You can barely tell that it's different except for the front grille and of course no tailpipes. And then that big slats on at the door pillar, at the A-pillar. Mentioned in here that there was the management at individual electric drive control unit. And it wasn't clear to me, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts, does it sound like there is a electric motor on each axle or at each wheel? I still don't think we know.
It seems to me when the only thing that really gives me any clue is they're talking about being able to control the torque response at each wheel. And I think the only way you can have that level of control is with a motor at each wheel.
That makes sense. And if you're a Range Rover, you're top of the line, you're probably going to make sense to have a motor at each wheel.
Yeah, and especially the response times they're talking about are very low.
Yeah, I don't know how you would do that with an axle motor because you'd have a differential in the way and yeah, you'd have a lot of stuff going on, and getting it done in 1 millisecond without having a separate motor for each wheel, I think would be technically very difficult.
It would be odd for them to put in, I think it would be difficult to do it in a 1 millisecond response time, but it would be also odd for them to continue using the ABS system for that kind of torque control on an electric.
Yeah, and there's no way an ABS system is going to respond that quickly, period.
Yeah. And most of the competitors are using 1 or 2 at most electric motors. That's true of Teslas and Rivians and most of the others, that even their sort of 4-wheel drive, all-wheel drive options are just front and rear motors. That could be a really good differentiator between the electric Range Rover and competitors, and probably would be worth spending more money on and pushing it further up market.
Remains to be seen when it comes out shortly, but I guess there was really nothing to reveal because it doesn't look any different.
No.
Yeah, it's going to be the specs and how they...
Nothing to reveal visually, but technically there is a reveal of sorts there.
Yeah, and I guess the other part that they do bring up is the performance of it on sand, because sand is a very different surface to be driving on with an electric vehicle that's going to provide tons of torque immediately, all torque immediately.
Right.
Which is more
Which is
like
what you don't want on sand.
Right. That's the last thing you want.
Unless you really do want to dig.
One of the reasons why you really do need a rolling computer be able to handle that on sand.
Yes.
A little more problematic in the mechanical side.
Yeah, and it would be a big big change from previous Range Rovers, because they all would be using standard automatic transmissions. And especially at this point, the Range Rovers have mini gears in their transmissions.
Well, and terrain response.
So add in the traction, right?
That's one of the things
control and terrain response.
With an electronic throttle control.
But it still wouldn't be able to put out full torque.
That's true. Okay, I see your point there. Yeah, you're right. Exactly.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they have the experience in developing that,
Right.
but in a completely different technology that just is not as prone to the problems that all electric would have on sand.
Does that mean you can no longer mash the pedal and have that fun? I guess not.
They can provide a mode for that.
Yeah. Mash mode. They could add mash mode.
Or make it a subscribable option.
Oh, no, let's not go there. Please. No, we're having a nice time on the news. Please, no. Let's not bring up subscription services. Yikes. Let's move on to the final story. This is from the Fast Lane YouTube channel, and this is a review of the 2023 Land Rover Defender 90. And again, it was a slow news month, and we haven't heard much about any reviews of 90s, and I thought it was worth bringing this one up. They have a 13-minute video where they purchased a used 90 with steel wheels. I'm not surprised. They like it. Of course, it has its usual quirks, like the seats don't fold flat, and it doesn't have a lot of boot space in the back, but it does well off-road.
So it's good that it didn't take them 3 tries to get one they liked.
There is that. Yes, good point.
Or one that worked. I don't think they even really cared about which one they liked the first time around.
Yeah,
You don't like the ones that don't work.
what was that story?
That's fair.
Didn't they go through 3 or 4 new Defenders? Is that right?
Something like that.
Initially, yes, right off the lot, there was some issues with it. At least one of them, it was with, they wanted to have the optional winch installed, and I guess they nicked one of the wires on the front harness, and that basically invalidated the entire vehicle.
Wow.
And that was the dealer, correct?
That was the dealer that did it.
That's pretty sad when you total a vehicle for a broken wire.
That's probably the first episode or the second when they first got it. Yeah,
Yep, I seem to recall that now. And that was a 110, right?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was before the 90 even came out. It was
Yeah.
very early in the experience.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Land Rover came out with the 110, and it was like 6 months or maybe even a year before they came out with a 90.
Well, that's a tradition for them. They did the same thing back in the 80s.
Oh, really? No, I didn't realize that. Okay. Learned something about Land Rover history.
In the pre-Defender age.
The NAS came here, Defender came here as a 110 first before the 90s arrived.
Yep.
And when the coil sprung model were first introduced, the 110 was out for a year or year and a half before they introduced the 90.
Though we never saw those here in North America.
No.
So if you're interested in a 90, maybe a used 90, it's worth checking out. We'll link, of course, to that in the show notes, as we do with all our stories. And that is the news for December of 2024. And now it's time on the CentreSteer podcast. It's our annual visit with Jeff Aronson, editor of Rover's magazine for a year in Land Rover. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you. Hello, Harold.
Hey, Jeff.
I should say welcome back. You're still in Vinyl Haven, Maine, correct?
On the near tropical island, it is close to 30 degrees here.
That sounds quite warm.
It is. Actually, for this time of year, we lost our snow cover to to a tremendous wind and rainstorm a couple of days ago. But there's snow in Maine or other parts of the mainland, and so
Like I used to say growing up in Minnesota, if there's a plus sign in front of the temperature, it's warm out.
break out your SPF, right?
Take the coat off at least.
So what's new in Jeff world? Any new trucks? Are they all still working? How's living with a disco?
So the Discovery that I happily purchased from an enthusiast down in Virginia Beach last spring has needed work. You might have seen it in the magazine just briefly for folks who didn't. I wound up discovering a leak not related to the cooling system of the car, but definitely a leak of coolant that in turn eroded the crank sensor wiring, which in turn sent funny signals to the ECM, which in turn would strand the vehicle every so often.
This is really why they decided to name that vehicle Discovery, because you keep discovering new things that are not quite right.
The only way to actually cure that was to redo the head gaskets, which I had done, and it has been successful. We have a new heater return hose to replace the one that was leaking as well. We have a replacement left exhaust manifold to replace the one that was cracked. And I just came back from some trips in the vehicle, using the vehicle. One was about 600 miles of driving, and it ran beautifully, even achieving, are you ready for this, Harold? 17 miles a gallon highway driving.
Who was towing you?
It was all downhill, I'm sure.
Too close. But the various components inside the car, such as the heater fan and the heated seats, actually work.
Wow, you have the one.
I have the one. It actually still works. The vehicle is going to get wax oiled. Hopefully next week. I have a schedule at a place about 100 miles from here that does wax oil commercially. So it can be cleaned and wax oiled. So I'm hoping to hang on to it. I do enjoy the Discovery One very much. But
Is this your second Discovery?
It is my second Discovery One, yes.
What happened to the first one?
The first one in Gilroy was sold to a Maine enthusiast when I thought I need to do X, Y, and Z to Gilroy, or I sell it off as somebody who might want to do that work and in turn look for another one. And that was my option. I sold it to another enthusiast here in Maine who had the work done, and Gilroy was fine in terms of just day-to-day daily driving and so on. I'm trying to use this current one, which is named Jaguar, for a less intensive, let's beat it up daily grind on it. We have the series vehicles to do the hard work. This one
so this one's for going to the opera then?
This one is going to the opera, or perhaps just towing the opera sets as opposed to constructing them on the vehicle.
There you go.
It's been a delight. It's been a delight. The QE1 continues to drive. She has a brand new Optima battery as of this month and fires right up now. And Rickman, the 109, Series 2A 109, is actually getting new seats installed in the front. I have finally run out of duct tape and said, you just have to buy elephant hide covered seats, X4 trim seats, which I did. Rover's North sent them out beautifully. And now it's just a matter of getting them bolted in place.
Excellent. So the fleet is doing well.
The fleet is doing well. The fleet probably would have benefited had I gotten off my duff in October when it was warmer to do the oil changes outdoors. We now have to really do oil changes in the chill. Serves me right.
Maybe you'll learn next year, maybe.
Right. As in the 30 years of ownership. I amply demonstrated how much I've learned.
Yes. As last year, I picked up an LR3. I'm wondering, does your Disco One also have a hot spot on the heated seat?
It does not have a single hotspot to scare me.
I have the single hotspot that scares you. It's I'll turn it on for 5 seconds and then turn it off, and then we're fine.
I believe that's called a short circuit.
Yes, I suspect. I know.
Sorry. but it is a delight to have it working on it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Good to hear, Jeff. Good to hear you.
Thank you.
So we have you here every year for the last, I don't know, it's been a number of years, almost since the beginning of the podcast, I believe. And we appreciate you coming on, talking about the year in Land Rover throughout, especially North America. Let's talk about the events that happened throughout North America this year. And what did you attend, or any notable events that you'd like to discuss?
I was very blessed to be able to attend quite a number of events, partially because of the magazine. We try and cover the significantly different events around the country and give a sense of what's going on, but also partially because Rovers North partnered with ANARC, the Association of North American Rover Clubs, and Rovers North agreed that it would sponsor and fund the creation of trials courses at events that may not have had them in the past. That gave another set of opportunities for me to travel to these events, set up the trials courses with the help of others from Rovers North and significantly volunteers from each of the member clubs. First trip was out to Redmond, Oregon, back in May. And that event, the Pacific Coast Club Rally, they've always had events out there, but they haven't had a trials course in quite a long time. And there were members of the ANARC board of directors who drove themselves out in some cases, flew out in others, to attend the Pacific Coast Club's event. It was held at a county fairground, which according to the Deschutes County organizers is the largest county fairground in Oregon and is a brilliantly active one. Most fortuitously for us as Land Rover enthusiasts, Overland Expo holds its annual Pacific Coast event at that very location. And they, over the years, have built a demonstration course for off-roaders to get a sense of how their vehicles would behave in challenging situations. And they run training programs around that at the event. We were able to use that course, thanks to Overland Expo, to create our own trials courses there. And that turned out to be both great fun, a lot of work, but my goodness, great fun with terrific participation. And hats off to the Pacific Coast Club, which, to my surprise, told me at the event that they had also organized an annual event earlier that month in another location. So here's a club taking on the creation of two significantly attended events in 1 month, which is extraordinary. You know the amount of work, John, it takes, same Harold, to you, to actually organize events. And I tip my cap to what they accomplished.
Extraordinary or insane?
Good question. I'm sure at times they thought it insane. Part of the fun for me, this is selfish, was that through an enthusiast with a shop in Redmond named Gus Brayton, he convinced the very well-known out there Jesse Coombs enthusiast to loan us a diesel 109 pickup, a Series 2A 109 diesel pickup. We got it loaned to us to be the work truck for the event. I have never had that much fun as driving a diesel pickup. If you think you have to shift a lot in a gas 2A, your right hand on a left-hand drive is blurring as the gear shift wends its way to every possible position. And in order to actually make it viable to take on any kind of speed, Jesse had installed a ferry overdrive on it. So you had shift opportunities in all 8 gears that way.
Oh, yeah. More gears are better when your power band is 500 RPM wide.
That is exactly it. I hadn't driven a 2.25 diesel in a long time, and it was just great fun to live with it for the weekend. It had its own starting routine, and Redmond's a pretty hilly area, so it was fun to accelerate, as you correctly identify, within 500 RPM, immediately have to shift again. And rather quickly, I might add, to keep speed up and keep RPMs, but it was great fun.
And
And
it's like you're driving Formula One. You're working that hard.
Jim Clark never worked as hard as I did on that. It was quite something to do.
Did you get out onto the trail there?
I never got to the trails. I never got to leave the trials course. I'm told that the trails, which were nearby, they weren't part of the fairground, varied, and some were very challenging. Some were more modest, green laning type, but all were quite fun. But I never had a moment to leave the trials course.
It was able to get out onto the trails and the one time, and something I encountered that had never encountered before is a lava rock. So that's something they have up there is that I'd not had no reason to encounter it anywhere else in the country.
Not very sidewall friendly.
That is correct. Two LR4s, actually, both of them had sidewall cuts on the same place on the one trail. And we have all those pictures, by the way. You can check those out off of anarch.club. Go out and visit that. We're keeping a repository of those old events, and the pictures that we have available are available through anarch.club. So you can check that one out. The RTV was a big hit at all of the events this year, and people really enjoyed it. So thanks to Rovers North for sponsoring all that throughout the year. And I know they're going to continue that into next year.
Yes.
And with the cooperation between Overland Expo and their trials course or their demonstration area for your trials course, do you think this will result in maybe they offer a trials course at Overland Expo?
Well, it's very interesting, Harold, that you would say that. The agreement in Oregon was once they saw what they, being Overland Expo,
Right.
trials course actually entails, they then asked the club, hey, our Overland Expo is 2 weeks after your event. Could you stage a trials course demonstration just as an activity at Overland Expo? And Emily Bowden, who is the new head of Overland Expo, has extended that invitation through Anarch to all their events. So if there's a local club that would like to have that, they will give them space for the club as comped as a vendor, if you will. But at the same time, it's another activity for people to watch at Overland Expos.
And for those who are not familiar with RTV route course, it's road tax vehicle, comes from the UK. And in fact, the UK NARC equivalent is ULRIC, and it's the Association of Land Rover Clubs in the UK. ANARC borrows that information for the RTV. And you're right, not only at Overland Expo over in the Pacific Coast, but also down in Alabama where we had the GAR. The owners of the facility were watching what was going on with the RTV and were like, can you leave that up? We'd like to, how does this work? We think we might want to continue doing this. So it ends up being a hit.
Think a slalom course in ski racing with gates that you must go through, and you need to do it without knocking the gate. In the case of a trials course, without touching the gate, and at the same time, at no particular speed. So the trials course really is to teach you about the dimensions of your vehicle in tight driving situations. As I love to say at those events, the only damage you can do in your Land Rover is to your ego, not to the vehicle. They really are excellent opportunities in a non-damaging way to test your knowledge of your vehicle's capabilities and your own as a driver. You will find when you are off-roading that there'll be situations very analogous to what you experienced in a trials course. It's all done at very slow speed. We insist upon low range when you're doing the trials course for that reason.
Not a timed event, so you just go at your own pace.
No particular speed, except that there must be some. It must be positive. You cannot stop. You cannot back up.
Exactly. Thank you, Howard. You're absolutely right. So you really have to plan ahead when you see tight obstacle situations, and you will always be following numbers on flags, usually in descending order, from 12 sets of gates down to one gate, and 12 to 1. So you're going to run 12 in each time. And usually based on the British rules, we have set up 5 and or 6, depending on the geography, sections, and your cumulative score, the lowest score, being lowest penalty numbers. That's what wins.
Like golf.
Yes, only you can throw your golf club in anger, but you really can't throw a Land Rover in anger. No.
Oh, you can smash it with a hammer.
The RTV really does benefit if you're driving a series truck, because typically you put it in low gear. You don't even have to touch the fuel pedal, because it really putters along at that speed, and it's almost perfect.
This is where a low gear diesel would really help you, because they just idle so nicely and crawl forward.
Right. And if you have a modern truck, that's where you realize you really should use the terrain response features, because it will retard the amount of fuel you're giving it, because it knows that you're off road. And so if you mash the pedal, you're not going to launch forward. It's a good way, as you said, Jeff, to test your capabilities in the vehicle and yourself.
And learn more about them. Exactly.
Yeah. So that was the Pacific Coast Rally. And then next we had, for an ARCAD, the North Star Rally in Minnesota.
Which, Harold, that's your home state. Is that correct?
And that is correct. I am from there. So I speak the language. I knew what they were saying.
No translator needed.
Unlike me. The Minnesota Club has been around for a long time. They indicated that they had not organized trials courses before for any of their events. And they definitely said, to my understanding, the ANARC, was we would like to make one of our rallies a bigger event in terms of impact and activity. And boy, did they ever pull that off. What a wonderful time in a place called Gilbert, Minnesota, somewhere up closer to Duluth than Minneapolis.
But further north than Duluth, actually. It's like way up there. It's almost to Canada.
It was just a treat to be in these small towns, because while the off-road park that was used was in one town, the actual campsite for everyone who camped there was in a different town. And so you got to drive between the two, and what a delight to be in these small former mining towns, in some cases extractive industry type towns. They are now in many ways outdoor tourist centers by virtue of their beautiful geography. We were near former iron mines, and indeed the off-road state park that we used for the course was all a former open pit mine. And the soil was this near iron filings, rusty red iron filing.
Red dirt rules, I think the magazine said.
That's what I said, yeah. We actually had to drill into the rock for each of the canes used to set up the trials course. It's a lot of work to find places where you could go safely and still challenge you. It's the first time we ever set up a trials course in like a riverbed. We were traversing water crossings as part of a trials course, which was very entertaining. I still had not been able to get the rust stains out of my work pants from that event. It still has a reddish glow to them, even though I washed them.
I have rust stains on my truck from last year's event.
But the crew there just did a superb job of organizing it, or providing real hospitable situations. That sort of Minnesota nice that gets parodied, that's real stuff. What a great group of people. I had a wonderful time there. To Duluth. Thanks to Tony and Dale, our hosts, if you will, had to watch out for all of us. I'd never been to Duluth. I'd never been along the Great Lakes before. It was quite something.
There was a good response, I think, to your setting up the trials course, too, because I don't think there was really but a handful of people in the club that understood what an RTV course was. But by the time the event was over, everybody knew and everybody enjoyed it.
Yeah, one of the nice things that ANARC has made possible is introducing this concept of a trials course at more and more events. But at the same time, Rover's North said to each of the participating clubs, keep all the banners, keep all the poles, keep all the signage they sent off to you. so that you can do it yourself. We needed volunteers. We involved volunteers, but in turn, the volunteers now know what to do and have a good idea of how to set something up. So you could have trials courses of any size at any event because all of that equipment stays with the club.
Yeah, that's really neat. That's a nice thing they're doing.
It's significant. These are not easy or inexpensive to create in terms of the signage and poles and all of that, but it's all there, and the clubs now have them for themselves. So that was Minnesota. Minnesota was great. It was August. And again, just a great time to be there with wonderful story.
How were the bugs?
The bugs were surprisingly taking a rest.
Yeah, they weren't bad this year.
But it was not bad at all.
I think they were worse last year.
Really? Okay. And again, I've only been to that once. So no.
Did you drive or fly out to Jeff?
Absolutely. The summer happens to be a busy time, both for the magazine and for my other jobs. So it's very happy to take all that time required to drive in.
Now, when you go to that event, mind you, you're only flying most of the way. There's still a significant amount of driving to be done because you fly into Minneapolis and you have another, 3 to 4 hours of driving.
Absolutely. And blissfully, because of, again, generosity of club members, there were 2 different Land Rovers that we had. We helped club members transport their vehicles to the event while they could ride in their newer Land Rovers with family members a lot more comfortably. Well, I had a beautiful 109, Series 2A 109, and we had access to a Range Rover Classic. So we got to drive to the event. It was really great fun to do. And again, to see Minnesota that way was just a wonderful opportunity, at least a portion of Minnesota.
So how many times on the highway did you get passed by a pickup truck that was hauling kayaks and lawnmowers?
You could have stopped it just by saying, how many times do we get passed?
That's a given anywhere. I'm just saying in Minnesota, you're in northern Minnesota when you get passed by kayaks and watercraft, quads, and lawnmowers all on the same trailer.
Same trailers.
What's the lawnmower angle, Harold? Just the weeds
because
are
they
high?
have cabins, they have to mow their lawn.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they bring their equipment.
Plenty. And there were plenty of convenience stores, little restaurants, gas stations alike, catering to that traffic, which is wonderful. It made it very easy and convenient. And our hosts seemed to know from their experiences in that part of Minnesota exactly where we should stop to get the finest onion rings and things like that. It was great.
They've been having that event for 40 years. They've got it pretty well mapped out.
I think you're right. It was really a gem. There was a chance to honor some of the longer term members whose service to the club was substantial. And it was quite moving to watch the tributes that were done at a ski area nearby in a ski lodge restaurant on that Saturday night of the event. And it was really nice to see them honor their longtime members and for their service to the club. It was quite something to see. Great fun.
And then in October, we had the third event this year, which was the Gulf Area Rover Rally. Thank you, Harold. And down in Alabama. Yeah, I know you were there, Jeff. I was there. What do you think?
So first off, this is like the 20th year or something of the Gulf Coast Land Rover Club. And it has always had events for a long time, 10 years or so. The big gathering was in conjunction with the Sand Rover Rally and the Florida Panhandle nearby. This is the first event that they thought they should do that was more than just a trail ride. So modeled after the multi-day Sand Rover Rally type events. But we had some terrific off-roading at that event and had opportunity to also set up another trials course at an off-road park. To your point, John, that you mentioned earlier, we had owners of that park who had never seen a trials course before. That off-road park really focuses more on quads and dirt bikes and so on. Doesn't do that much vehicle.
Side-by-sides, I think they call them down there.
So to see Land Rovers doing their trails and to watch the trials course, you were absolutely right. We were asked to leave the course gates up so that other participants with different vehicles and bikes could run the course and test themselves. This is the first time that the Gulf Coast Club itself organized this big multi-day type event. Considering that Alabama is also like Minnesota, a big place, a lot of participants came from the Birmingham area. That's a significant drive for them. Fortunately, is one poor guy from the Birmingham area and a newer Defender hit a deer. And having some expertise through Ralph Sarek Auto Works out of Virginia that came down to the event was a real help so that he knew what he could take off, block off, and so on to keep the car going so he could get home before full repairs could be made. It was a nice mix of new and old vehicles and an absolutely hysterical team from Iowa. John, I'm forgetting the name. Is it Lost Nation?
Lost Cause Ranch.
Cause Ranch.
Yes.
In Iowa. Those guys were hysterical. They have a popular YouTube channel that I've enjoyed.
They have been on this. Yes, Joe's been on the show.
Joe and Silent Ted. And they came and I believe they won the trials course and they drove beautifully in their series truck.
Technically, sir. Joe ran it and won, and I also let me drive it and also
That's
won.
what I think.
Yes.
I was about to say that. I saw you with the helm.
They were nice enough to let me drive. And that's when I stuck it in first, and I never touched the accelerator, and it just puttered along perfectly. And
so the real question is, are they going to ever let you drive anything of theirs ever again?
I think so.
Highly entertaining. And
Yes.
as was the whole group, Southern Hospitality is not a fiction. People were just great. And I enjoyed, thanks to Charles Bell, the founder, president, and organizer of this event, I enjoyed Mobile. I'd never been to Mobile. It's like a little New Orleans. Great fun.
Yeah.
Good food.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. The food down there is really good. The food we had for the Saturday dinner was amazing.
Great barbecue.
That was very good.
So the trials course. So we had this huge sandy area that we had to create the trials course from. We did not have any equipment that we could use to create modules or something. So we had to look and or dig on our own by hand. Just before when we had finished the trials course, we had 5 sections. Somebody who owns the course decided that our section 2 needed to be eliminated by virtue of taking a bulldozer through it. We arrived the morning that we're supposed to start the trials course to discover that section 2 has been bulldozed over. We had to recreate it on the fly.
It changes the challenge a bit.
Yes, it did.
It certainly did. It worked out fine in the end, but it's not what I wanted to hear or see. You remember how hot it was, John?
It was October, and it was 90. It was something close to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. When I went home on the Sunday, the temperature got cut in half. It went from about 80, like 85 down to 42 by the time I got to Virginia. It was hot. Thankfully, it wasn't humid. It was just hot.
But I just baked. We were in this open sandy area. One of the fellows who was a volunteer caught a picture and sent a picture to me. And I really looked as though it was a parody cartoon in the New Yorker where they're crossing the desert on their belly, trying to find water. Those constants that's just what I looked like.
Yeah.
My God, was I baked and broiled.
Oh,
At least you weren't orange.
Give it a little more time. Thankfully, the Crowlers brought out a pop-up, and we all got to use the pop-up tent, which was thanks to them. Otherwise, it would have been way worse.
Because, scoring. Thanks for your help, John and Sally, on marshalling and scoring at that. I appreciate it.
It was fun and enjoyable. When we got there that morning, and you said the course had been bulldozed, or part of it had been bulldozed, we ended up making this 90-degree bend, and everybody complained, which was great. Because they all wanted to get through it without having any issues. And you're like, that's not the point of this. The point is to challenge yourself. And it's not my fault. You didn't check out the course ahead of time to see how much you had to make that curve.
Well, and that's a devious extra challenge, because if they've been scoping it out for days in advance and had their plans already made for stage 2, guess what? It's different.
Oh, good point.
That was true. I do need to say, we, being whoever sets up the courses, when I design them, you always run the course in a vehicle. If you can do it, admittedly, we know exactly where to turn and so on. But if we can do it, you can do it.
Yep.
So all that whining about this is unfair, not at all.
Nope. If you want to see a lot of whining, you should have been part of the Anarch Cup competition. Now
But if I want to explain what that is to listeners who don't
so
know various components of the cup.
the Anarch Cup took place at every one of the Anarch supported events that we had this year, and it's similar to an RTV, but it's strictly for clubs that participate in it, and in order to get points to eventually win the cup for the year, which is like the big challenge throughout.
Sort of a
Throughout the year.
pentathlon.
Yes. So there was a 6-stage to the RTV, which was in a different location down at Alabama at the off-road park. And that's where the final stage of the Anarch Cup took place. And Ralph Sarek had set up the course. And what you needed to do for this one was there was a trailer. You had to hook up the trailer, run it through the course, and then back in and put the trailer back without touching any cones. If you touched a cone, you got a point. If you deviated from the course, I think it was a couple points. There was the different points there. Ralph gave out some basic ideas of what you needed to do. The lock was on the trailer. You had to remove the lock. And then when the trailer came back, then you put the lock back on. There was a driver, and then there was the kind of the trailer person. And the trailer person couldn't get back in the vehicle. They just had to stay there and then let the driver go off and do their thing. So these were like the basic instructions they got. As it went on, competition went on, someone would do something like, you can't do that. And Ralph would say, you didn't ask me if you could do that or not. Then the subsequent people who participated started to understand how things went, and they would do things. They would say, can I do this? Can I do that? And you go, yes, you can do this. No, you can do this. To the point where the final competitor had to get the trailer on and off, actually had Ted stand on the trailer to balance it so that it popped up off the truck and back on again. And everyone's, hey, you can't do that. And Ralph said, you never asked me if you could get someone to help you. There was some competition going on.
So that was
It's the things the rules don't say that are more important than the things they do.
Yes.
If you're not looking for loopholes, you're not trying hard enough.
it was very clever the way that each event had the RTV component for the cup, but also had a scavenger hunt. And it was usually a physical challenge, similar to what you're describing with the trailering combined with the Section 6 for the RTV for this Gulf Coast.
Pacific Coast, wasn't it? You had to take a spare tire and run around the RTV.
And that one, if you remember, was deviously created by former Camel Trophy competitor Doug May, who spoke at the event. Ralph Sarek will tell you that his trailer event is right out of the Trek and Defender Trophy events, because I'd been to those and seen exactly that sort of thing done. And you really had to follow all safety precautions of loading and unloading. Hitching and unhitching a trailer. And the scavenger hunts were always their own devious nature. I think we have to tip our cap to Minnesota's Rick Olson for creating, without question, the most literary scavenger hunt instructions that we have ever read. Right? Something. They're all there.
That's Dr. Rick to you, sir.
Rick to me. Exactly. It should be. Not deny him his appropriate title.
Those were the kind of the Anarch events throughout the year. There were other events that took place, not just the Anarch ones.
The pleasure setting up a trials course at the annual Mid-Atlantic Rally of the Rover Owners of Virginia Club. Once again, it was held at almost what for them is their historic location, about 2 hours out of Richmond. And this year, once again, returned to hurricane season. So the hurricane season returned just in time for the event, which meant that the fields used for the trials course, which are Virginia clay, just became ice skating rinks. And we were at a point where we had to eliminate the use of any side slopes or hills, not because it would cause you problems with points, but it would actually slide your vehicle down into a ravine.
You know what they call clay that's watered down to where you can pour it, right? Slip.
What do they call it?
Slip.
How perfect. Because that's exactly what you do. Literally, we were risking losing vehicles down the hillsides.
Wow.
So we had to rapidly change that trials course. Couldn't use the areas that we'd used in the past because the James River usually have a gentle river crossing at Mar in order to get to the trials courses. It was now a raging flood, way too dangerous to pretend crossing. So that all those areas that we'd used for the trials course in the past couple of years were off limits. The club responded brilliantly to the weather changes in terms of keeping off-road activity going. It didn't seem to deter anyone from camping. It did not hinder registrations. John, I want to say, I believe the event sold out within 2 hours of registration being put online.
It might have been shorter than that, but yes.
Yeah, I think it was less than an hour.
That's 200 vehicles that they allowed in this shift.
They actually delayed the registration opening because everybody was up at, or most everybody was up at the North Star rally.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it was like, oh, we're going to announce it like August 1st. And they're like, no, everyone's worried because they're going to be at the North Star. So
they got to wait till everybody's back to their high-speed internet connection so they can get in and get their tickets before they sell out.
It really was like day trading. Yeah.
Or getting tickets to a Comic-Con or Taylor Swift or something.
It was so big.
And it'll happen again this year because it's the 40th anniversary of Mar, and they're going to have another large event.
They've been permitted to grow yet again. The real question is, where's everyone going to camp? That's the thing I think that's standing in the way.
Especially if it's a proper Mar and it washes out.
And it will. It seems
to be the way. Yes.
That's what Mar stands for, mud and rain.
Mud and rain, yeah. So it was great fun. It was terrific food, entertainment, great people, great off-roading, and a real challenging set of trials courses.
What was the sense of the distribution of vehicles? Are you seeing, is it balance between, say, newer and older? Is there a shift happening?
I'm seeing fewer series vehicles at events. The Discoveries, particularly the 1s and 2s, particularly the 2s actually, and the LR3s, even 4s. Those are the most common vehicles. There are a bunch of Defenders always, but I'm seeing fewer series vehicles just because I think they're becoming at times more collector vehicles than they are daily drivers.
Yeah. I think they become too valuable to go bashing into trees with.
There is that. It's true.
Actually, it's the newer people want a little more comfort, and it's harder to get those vehicles to drive them several hours to get to the event.
Oh my gosh! Of course.
Oh yes. Oh yes. I went to an event this past November, and it was 2 hours away, and I ended up taking the Series 3 because I really wanted to, and I did. But I have a new rule now. I'm only driving an hour in the wintertime in a Series truck because it's not me. It's not driving the truck. It's not the problem. It's everyone else. Because you're on the Pennsylvania State Turnpike and you've got a 53-foot tractor trailer passing you I'm doing 55 and it's doing 75. And there's no fun there. I enjoy my Series, my 109, but there's no fun there. That was not fun. And that part, I think that's one of those things, unless you're trailering it to an event.
But we're definitely seeing new Defenders, even a few new Discoveries at events. And the other kind of fun thing to see is just by age, the L322 Range Rovers are becoming accessible for purchase and are proving to be quite tough. And they're excellent vehicles, both for your comfort of getting to the events, and they're perfectly capable, if a little big, they're still perfectly capable of her.
And until you drive them in too deep of a water and you short out the alternator.
Oh, yeah, you don't want to do that. But that water is often, everybody wants a water crossing. Everybody should really be thinking 3 times before you cross water. It's going to cause problems. There's just no way around it.
And it's one thing to do it in a series truck. It's another thing to do it in a computer on wheels.
Even in a series truck, you have no effective brakes for a while until you can dry off the drums.
Yeah, so a little planning ahead and you're okay.
Jeff, any other events that you wish to note?
I certainly wish I could have gone to more events because there are some tremendous ones that just never seem to be able to get to. But people who do and share photos, videos, etc. online really make me want to do it. I would love to get to a Robosonia course event. This is the Rovers Club out of Eastern Pennsylvania. And they hold a tremendously challenging off-road event at the Anthracite Off-Road Park, I believe it's called. Or is it private land, John? I'm not certain where they hold it. But it is kind of a rock climb in Eastern Pennsylvania that's really impressive. And they do a great job of setting up a challenging course. You can learn a lot about you and your vehicle, and what a great group of people. And the opposite coast, both the SoCal Land Rover Club, that's Southern California, and the San Francisco chapter of the NorCal Club have recently run events that in numbers and in enthusiasm are clearly successes. And I just wish I had the time and the extra pages in the magazine to recognize those activities. And that's just a handful of some that I've plucked out, because I know there are others. I do know the relatively new Cuyahoga Valley Land Rover Club out of central or northeastern Ohio.
Northeast Ohio
has had its first off-road events. And Don Harvey, to his credit, has started that club and built it up wonderfully. It's great to see that they're gathering numbers, interest, and Don doesn't have to do it all that way. It's just great. I love to see new clubs form.
along with the Carolina Trail Rovers that started up and got really active this year.
Yeah. And perfect timing. That actually makes, in the Carolinas anyway, 3 Carolina clubs. I give them credit. I know they're geographically distant, but wow, what great opportunities between the Old North Safe Club, Carolina Rover Owners Club, and now this new Carolina Trail Ride.
Yeah, I wanted to note when you're talking about NorCal, they've been doing Rovicon for, I think they're in their 5th or 6th one. And just a little shout out to them. We see you. We know you're doing Rovicon. And they also have their own podcast just about NorCal activities. So you want to go check out our friends over at the NorCal. They're doing their own podcast of their activities. And if we don't talk about your event, by the way, don't take it personal. There's so many events, which is a really good thing to talk about, that there are events going on all over the country. There's SCARD going down on Texas, another one of note. And of course, up in Canada, you have the OVL birthday party. There's some smaller events that go on throughout the year. So don't take it personal if we don't talk about your event.
If we don't talk about your event, shoot us a note and maybe we will.
Well said, Harold said, yes.
The other that, John, that I certainly want to commend is a different kind of event that's growing up. And I want to just commend first Cooper Murray of Riverside, Connecticut, who started what he calls the Vineyard series based on his family's connection with Martha's Vineyard of Massachusetts. Cooper has managed to bring both, there are a lot of defenders at the seasonal homes on Martha's Vineyard and some that are year-round. But he's also brought 40 to 60 people to Martha's Vineyard every summer just for a weekend of gathering, shooting the breeze, comparing their Land Rovers, few scenic drives. These are not intended as hardcore off-road events, but for those who own Land Rovers and really love to keep them in a more pristine condition for longevity, these events are perfect, and they're really oriented to that type of owner. Similarly, Cooper's put one on Nantucket, on Cape Cod. He just did a delightful event in conjunction with an enthusiast in Salisbury, Connecticut. So an architectural firm is owned by a tremendous enthusiast whose name is Rafe Churchill. And Rafe operates on the side a company called Ellsworth Classics. He's looking to broker Range Rover Classics and similar heritage vehicles for Land Rover enthusiasts, and just to make them available to people who are interested in purchasing one. But his real love is simply the daily driving of any one of what I believe were 4 or 5 different Land Rovers and Range Rovers that he and his wife own. Rafe partnered with his little town of Salisbury, Connecticut, where his company is located, a very beautiful, historic 18th century looking town in Connecticut with some really older 17th century buildings still standing. They have a community Christmas Day, and Rafe decided that he would have an open house at his architectural firm and bring in a group of Land Rover enthusiasts. So he partnered with Cooper Murray to just spread the word. And there on the main street in Salisbury, Connecticut, on December 7th, were some 40 Heritage Land Rovers parked along the main street for everyone in town and those that they would come in for their second homes in that area to view on a community Christmas Day. And the place was decorated up wonderfully. Rafe asked me to help put a panel of interested enthusiasts together from Connecticut, which we were able to do. And we spent about an hour in a nice warm building with good cider and tremendous cider donuts. Probably 50 people tucked in that building talking about our Land Rover love. What a great change of pace type of event. There was a little drive through Litchfield County, which is a beautiful part of Connecticut, just a short drive to show off the area, and then everybody dispersed back to their homes. It was a very clever thing to do. I know there's plenty of chapters of existing clubs that do that type of thing already, but partnering with a community event and bringing a nice surprise to Salisbury was really a treat. And you could see the reaction of people who wondered what brought 40 Land Rovers to take up all the park places on our main street. It was great. And that was really a very entertaining event. And to that notion, want to commend as well a Hawaiian enthusiast, David Sarami, who is an architect, ironically, also in Honolulu. David missed the existence of a Land Rover club that has gone dormant in that area and revived it along with the help of the local dealer in Honolulu. And there is now an activities-based Hawaii Land Rover Club, which you can find online and social media. I did beg Rovers North to say that the editor of the magazine should certainly be at that event. The request was declined, but I'm going to keep at it, particularly if they run a winter event.
Perhaps the Hawaii Club should request Rovers North's assistance at setting up an RTV course. That might be your in.
I will look for every possible way to get myself back out there. I've only been once, and it was quite an experience to be in Hawaii. It is on Oahu. I know the other islands have Land Rovers on them, but the one dealer in the state at the moment is on Oahu.
I think we should have an ANARC supported event in Hawaii. How about that?
You could. If you really want to, you want to milk your board position, John, why not have the board send you as a representative of ANARC?
Oh, I like that idea. There we go. That'd be a great idea. Although this might be an opportunity for us to get a series truck and convert it into a pontoon rover. How long would that take to get across the Pacific?
Probably no longer than it takes to get to your event 2 hours.
The challenge there is not adding pontoons to the series. It's keeping the pontoons from leaking before you get there.
Well, that's great. So we have new clubs sprouting up and one there in Hawaii. That's fantastic.
It really is. And again, these are, in many cases, less formal organizations than some of the legacy clubs, if you will, in the U.S., but that's fine. They are able to connect easily through social media, and they are definitely pulling enthusiasts together. It's a wonderful thing when people take initiative to get us all together that way. It was the enthusiasm of that group that really made that so much fun.
I think that's a trend that we've seen in the last couple of years that's very positive, of new folks coming into the Land Rover community and becoming enthusiasts. You're seeing an increase, and that's a testament to the events. The clubs have been doing events all these years, and then now are getting new folks in.
It is wonderful. And the availability of Land Rover models due to, frankly, the potential for longevity of a Land Rover means that you can enter the Land Rover world And yes, you're going to spend some money on your vehicle, no question, but that will relatively lower initial entry price. And the fact that it can get you to the event, these 90s vehicles can get you to the event, and you can have fun at the event in them, and they can get you home. And it's less painful than taking our series vehicles on long trips like.
Yes, especially as we get older, that comfort becomes a little more important.
But the other is, look, John, it was your point. You can do 55 to 62, 63 in a series Rover all day, but you'll be the slowest thing on the interstate.
That's the thing here. And people don't realize about the U.S., just when you get on the interstates, how people are traveling. And they're maybe paying attention, maybe, for as much as people complain about the Pennsylvania State Turnpike. They have been expanding it to 3 lanes, and that is fantastic because now I have a Rover lane that I can go slower. Because I am worried about people coming up behind me, especially if it's dusk or they're not paying attention. And even if I do have my lights on, they're small, they're maybe not that bright. Even if you put LEDs in there, so there is concern when you're traveling.
If you've been a driver over the past 20 years, you were a new driver 20 years ago, you expect to see a certain expanse of tail lamps and a certain luminance brightness to a tail lamp. You expect to see a third tail light somewhere. And our series tail lamps, essentially like the type of little light you use to check how your retinas are working when you're at a doctor's office. That's what it looks like on the road to somebody in a 21st century vehicle.
I was going to go with something a little more seasonal and say they're like Christmas lights.
Christmas lights are brighter.
It's also the speed differential. If you're traveling, there's 20, 30 mile speed differential, and they're traveling very fast. And in some parts, especially where I live, curves and hills, man, it's not straight and flat. You're coming around a bend, and all of a sudden there's this vehicle going 40 miles an hour, and he has to shift into a lower gear. Yeah, they're not for that.
The other issue that we are finding ourselves in now, all of us have become of the age that it's not the speed at which you get there. It's like, how much are you going to do to your spine during that drive? And are you going to be able to walk once you get there?
You are not wrong, sir. Very valid point.
So these newer type of events, I just think are wondrous. And they're not our traditional, what we think an off-road event has to be, but they allow an entry point for people who either life situation and or personal interest just doesn't extend that way, but they love their Land Rovers. They love to get together with other Land Rover enthusiasts. That makes it all worthwhile.
And that's where I think the RTV comes into play, because there is a controlled situation where you have less chance of doing damage to your vehicle or getting pinstriping, especially if you've just now bought a brand new one or it's new to you. RTV is great for that kind of controlled situation.
And it's really an equalizer too, because it happens at such slow speeds.
Right.
You know, you can't build a vehicle for an RTV, really. Pretty much anything you show up in has the same chance.
Yes, because actually when you design an RTV, you're actually looking to recognize that while a newer vehicle might be wider, it also has a much better turning radius.
As opposed to a 109, which turns like an aircraft carrier.
If you're lucky.
You can design it easily with all the different capabilities in mind. And the new vehicles, driven well, actually do quite well with these. In fact, they're harder to design to force you to get points because you really can avoid a lot in a new vehicle. If nothing else, you have an oral reminder if you leave that side mirror thing on when you're getting too close to something.
I will say the one exception is the 4 control. Usually just too big period and then just plows through everything.
Yeah, it goes over everything.
Of course, that's what they were designed for.
Exactly. So those have been my experiences this year, John. A wonderful variety of opportunities anywhere. There's no part of the country now that doesn't seem to have a Land Rover fun activity for you, whether short or a longish one in your region.
And a good place to, if you're not sure if there's a club near you, you can search Facebook especially. Facebook has become the Land Rover community. You may hate it, you may like it, you may not, I don't know. But that's the place I go to if you're looking for a club or want to go to see what something's going on in your area. You can also go to anarc.club and check out. We have a list of member clubs that are there, and they have links to where those are located. So it's always a good place to start. I try to direct people there if they're in an area and are like, hey, I'd like to go do something. Go check out and see if there's a local club and what they're doing. They may even be doing cars and coffee or some more. What's the P one? Pistons and pints, I think I've heard out there too. Landies and loggers.
The other way is just to, when you see a Land Rover come by, run them down, chase them down, talk to them, see who they are and what they're up to, and if they know of any club activities.
Yes. That's one of the things I want to do in an ARC also, is teach people about vehicle older Land Rover identification. Yes, this is a Land Rover too.
So those driving rangies can identify a Land Rover even whilst looking down their nose.
Or it's more our friends in the newer Defenders that don't understand that there are something that came before them. And
I get more recognition from Jeep drivers than I do new Defenders.
Yes, exactly, Harold. Exactly. Maybe you should take the duck off the windscreen.
No, it's just at speed. They think the Jag Leaper on my hood is a duck, I guess.
Jeff, thanks for giving us a little overview of club and rally activities throughout North America this year. So in addition to all the club activities throughout this year, Land Rover has also moved into activities, and they've extended doing the Destination Defender. I know I said Land Rover and it should really be JLR, and I know I should say Defender because it's the house of brands now. But guess what? I'm saying Land Rover. But they had Destination Defender. I'm still spicy about the name change. They had the Destination Defender events this year. There was one in Malibu just before the fires, by the way, there's been a bunch of fires over there. Did you get to go to the Destination Defender event, Jeff?
I did not this year. No, I did not. But to Land Rover's credit, and it is Land Rover, you're right, John. To Land Rover's credit, they have continued as a mainstay of the Destination Defender to first move it in different places in the country. So it was Texas last year, Malibu this year. There's rumor that there will be an East Coast version in the spring of Destination Defender. And this has not been solidified to me, but I keep hearing about it through Land Rover circles.
Would that be back in New York?
That would be a yes, but that I wouldn't know. Wouldn't know. The great thing at the Destination Defender is the existence of the Defender Service Awards. So this competition is now, I believe this will be its 4th year. Essentially, Land Rover has said, if you are a nonprofit doing one of 6 broad service functions for your community or region in the U.S. or in Canada, you have a chance for your membership and your supporters to indicate through online polling their support of what you do. And we will award one Defender 130 per each of the 5 categories of service activities, from Veterans Affairs to outside rescue to recreation and kids activities. Well, we will award you a Defender 130 logoed up to your organization, and we have no role in selecting who's the winner. This is strictly the basis of your activity supporters saying to us in online polling that we do operate, that we think what you're doing is worthy of receiving a Defender. Once again, there were 5 winners from this year's competition, but a 6th one is chosen from finalists who didn't win in previous year. So there were 6 Defender 130s given out. They undoubtedly will have the same training activity when the vehicles have been prepped with the gear that you need, your organization needs to do its work, with a comped activity at the Land Rover experience, usually in Asheville, North Carolina, and they will bring people there to pick up their vehicles and then drive them home. It is a remarkable donation, frankly, contribution on the part of Land Rover with sister partners. So I know Chase Bank is very active in this. Pelican is very active. IE4 is very active. There are a number of companies that are also contributing to these award activities. But in the end, collectively, there are 6 Defender 130s given out for that organization to have. And they keep doing this. I just think it is the finest representation of what Land Rover really should stand for, and is certainly a nod to Land Rover's heritage as a work that's doing, as Richard Hammond would say, significant things. And
Important things.
yes, important things there.
Somewhere for someone.
For someone, exactly. You've got it. That's it, Harold. It's a remarkable thing to do, and came out of ideas from Land Rover's executives here in the U.S. And I just think it's fabulous. On the Range Rover side, once again, Range Rovers continue to sell in numbers that are unprecedented. The company, the order sheets at the UK are longer than you can imagine, despite the fact that the cost of a Range Rover keeps increasing as your customization opportunities, your bespoke options keep growing. And they have a fan base that remains loyal to the marque and seems to be increasing in number each year.
And same with the Defender too. Defender selling very well. And the order book is still quite lengthy.
The order book is lengthy. The number that you see is still, by U.S. standards, is relatively small, but they're selling in the neighborhood of 20,000 a year here in the U.S., which is about all they can make for this market.
Yes.
And make it work. And John, we've talked about some of this issue in past podcasts. I have to give credit to Jerry McGovern and his team of design engineers, because Land Rover really hasn't had a model that didn't sell well, even though the length of each vehicle's life is longer than the automotive average. Land Rover doesn't have the capital to reinvent the wheel every 5 years. So you really some long and tooth looks, but even if whatever I feel about them personally is irrelevant to the sales success. They are selling, and they're garnering all new enthusiasts around them. So he's doing the right thing. No wonder he's an icon in the automotive design world.
Whether or not you agree with his design choices, you can't argue with his success rate.
No, and I can't at all, and wouldn't. That's what I'm really saying, Harold. I have to give him full credit for what's being accomplished. And it continues to be, even with each new iteration. So I think for us as enthusiasts, guys, the real question is, what happens with the Discovery?
Being squeezed out the middle from what I can see.
Sales everywhere are just down. And some of it's because the Defender took some of the Discovery's market away from it.
Some, I think all.
The Defender took what market from the Discovery that the Range Rover hasn't?
Yeah, but the Range Rover has been able to go up in price.
But the Range Rover has all these different variants within their family now, and some of those at the lower end of the Range Rover scale, I think, has displaced Discovery buyers.
I'm not certain the Velar or the Evoque are really aimed at the Discovery buyer, but I accept, Harold, that without question, it's been a cannibalization that's been going on. The challenge for the house of brands, which you have another weak brand really needing your attention and maybe capitalization at the same time you're trying to revive the Jaguar brand.
I think that's been Land Rover's problem all along, has been capital to invigorate all of their lines.
Since 1948, that's been a problem for them, I think.
Not a new problem.
Good point. It's nothing new. How about that? It's nothing new. We've certainly talked about the Discovery many times, and there's not even been any rumor or hint about what's going on with the Discovery coming out of Land Rover JLRs. It makes you wonder. I've said it before. Maybe I said it mainly just to get people thinking, but maybe it's time for it to go. Maybe only focus on two. You are a niche player. You are moving up into the luxury level of motordom. There are Defenders that are in that 6 figures now. You can get a Defender at 6 figures, but you also have Defenders that you can get into it at 70,000, at least here in the U.S. So maybe Defender or Discovery, I don't know, entry level, maybe making an actual entry level vehicle, something in the 50,000 range. I don't think they know.
The question is, do they care? If they're selling everything else, do they really need to worry about whether they could just easily just let it dwindle?
I think, first off, I think you do because you have invested capital in terms of production and in terms of marketing.
Okay.
And created a brand. You allowed yourself to let that brand wither, and your Defender changes cut into the purposes for which you once bought a Discovery. I think those purposes are still around, and I'm not certain the Defender fits them all. The challenge, a perfect example. So yes, I have a 25-year-old Discovery One. When I'm in it, I realize it has capabilities that no Heritage Defender ever had. So then the question comes, if you have a new Defender, can you still create a functionality around the Discovery? Discovery was a family-oriented vehicle or a multiple-person-oriented vehicle that could live, if you will, comfortably and positively in different on-road and off-road worlds. I still think you can do that with the Discovery. I just think that you need to rethink how you package the Discovery and what features you put into it. Remember, our Defenders in this country, the NAS Defender and the Discovery Ones, were essentially the same drivetrain. They were nearly the same frame.
Which is why there's a fleet of rusty D1s in my backyard, because I'm cannibalizing them to fix Defenders.
Yeah.
That's right. Cheap source of Defender parts mechanically.
But I'm also reminded, and this is where I think they can do some real serious rethinking. When I was getting on the ferry this morning, we were told, because of extreme tides this morning, we actually had to back you onto the ferry. So instead of driving straight down the ferry boat, you actually had to back on to the boat. And that is a narrow ramp. The boat looks pretty narrow when you're trying to put some cars in there and so on. Being able to lean back, look out a back window and see, because I don't have any cameras, obviously, or if you had a backup camera, it would do the same thing. That ability. And as I'm looking back, I realized, I could fold all this down and create this space, or I could put 5 people in mine. I don't have the jump seats in the rear, in something that's relatively narrow and tall so that it adds spaciousness to its height. This is a remarkable set of capabilities in a design. And one of the ferry workers, who looked to be about 20 something, she came up to me and she said, "I love your car." So I didn't say anything about never call it a car, please. I recognized that there was a unique look to that early Discovery, right on through, frankly, the LR4s, Discovery 4, which has not been replicated. And the Defender doesn't try and do that. I think you could recapture a number of people who've maybe morphed over the mark or are finding that things like the Range Rover Sport is just a little too small. And you have a niche there that you could fill with the Discovery brand. I throw those out, John, as reasons to me that you could keep the Discovery and keep the capitalization that you've already put in place and make it work for a revival of that particular model line.
Excellent. That's good. I would like to see Discovery continue. I just think the way they have made the house of brands, I think is the best way to explain that. Defender is now can be all things to all people. And whereas in the past, I don't think it was.
As can Range Rover, which leaves Discovery again in the middle. What does it do that others don't?
At this point, it's just a look, really, and a name.
Right. But the name captures there's an awful lot of people who grew up in the 90s when their families had Discoveries, was the volume leader.
Yeah. And then they changed the name because they screwed the name here due to reliability and called it LR3 and LR4. And now you've got a whole generation of people that go, what's Discovery?
Which is true. Although, John, it also coincided with the fact that marketing people talk to each other because nobody else will talk to them. And they became convinced that this alphanumeric way of identifying vehicles was the coolest thing ever. So yes, some of it was the Discovery. When you brought the name back, you actually called it the new Discovery. So they didn't play on that. Discovery 1, 2, 4, or 5. But in the rest of the world, the Discovery name disappeared. And we have to remember that the Discovery has a following outside of the U.S. I know we're very U.S. focused because we live here and we're enthusiasts here, but there's a rest of the world functionality to all the Land Rover brands that we don't necessarily see here. Range Rovers don't sell everywhere as well as they sell in the U.S. The Range Rover Sport is relatively unknown outside of the U.S. and the Middle East because of our fuel situation.
I think we can take a page from what they've done with the Freelander name as a possibility of what could happen to Discovery, where they've taken the Freelander name, they kept it, they continue to trademark it, and now it's going to be used exclusively in China for a specific model type. That could be something. They could make it a specific type of, make Discovery something different, or maybe someone else produces it.
They could send Chinese-built Freelanders to the U.S. and slap disco badges on them.
There we go.
Speaking of our much maligned, if I could digress for a second, there has been a resurgence of interest in the surviving Freelanders here in North America. Our most cited and most lauded photographer in the Land Rover world has to be Nick Dimbleby, correct?
Yes, correct.
Nick Dimbleby has bought and shared photos with me of his either AA yellow Freelander 3-door with the soft top rear that he just bought. SE3.
SE3. Yep. He's posted photos of that. Yes.
Thank you. Bill, you'll see an article in the next issue of Rover's magazine by Bill Cooper, the enthusiast from New Jersey. Bill has found and purchased a Camel Trophy. Won't it be 03 or something?
I think, actually. I think it was 2000.
They're running in South America. He bought one. He has it's a diesel with 5-speed, and took it to the Camel Trophy reunion in Portugal. And reads it in England right now. He loves it. He just put a couple thousand miles on it, like right off the bat.
See, you said the special thing that we didn't get here, the diesel version.
Yeah, there's that.
Diesel and 5-speed, which is, see, that makes anything better.
Yes.
It does to me.
Yeah.
But I must say that Bill really had, Nick loves his. And what we call the LR2 model is actually one of the best-selling Land Rovers in the rest of the world because of size and relative running economy.
And it still does well here on the secondary market. Used car LR2 still.
Yeah, they do.
It does well.
And they were far more reliable than the original Freelander because the drivetrain is not a Land Rover drivetrain.
No matter what works, that's the key.
That was the key.
The point is they selected something that was bone stock reliable.
Yeah, but we have the same with the Evoque. The Evoque does not sell well here. Range Rover Evoque, it's too small to some. But in the rest of the world, it's the biggest selling model. Great.
It's the Freelander of Range Rovers.
And it is.
Actually, the Disco Sport, sir, is the Freelander. Took over the Discovery.
But of the Range Rover brand, the Evoque is the Freelander of Range Rovers.
Actually, as part of that Disco discussion, there's also, we forget about the Disco Sport. It's still out there, too.
It's still out there, and people who've owned them speak very highly of them.
And I think that's because of the size.
It is.
And of course, Land Rover's considering adding a new model, the Defender Sport.
Yeah, we'll see if that really happens. There was more talk about it a few years ago, but the success of the Defender, particularly in the 110 and 130 versions for sales, I don't know that there's room to add. Even I would love to see it, a Defender Sport or a Defender 80 or something like that.
It makes it easier to justify the house of brands concept when you have more than one model. Yes, I know 3 different wheelbases, but there are 3 different lengths, but it's still just basically one model. So you have the Defender Sport and suddenly you have 2 models. It's more of a house now.
But you have to be careful, just like I hope they've learned from the Discovery, of not cannibalizing your other product lines.
I will say one thing on the new Defender that they need to get a handle on is some of these reliability issues they have. I do see, especially on Reddit and on Facebook too, reoccurring issues where it's almost like you're rolling the dice of whether you get a good one or you get one that's very problematic. But there are windshield issues. There's now headlight, the DLR light issues. I think they do need to get a handle on that. Some of the folks that are coming into the Land Rover brand for the first time, and if they get bit by some of these reoccurring problems, I think
That
it's something to
reminds
get a
me
handle on.
like buying a Freelander back in the day. It was a dice roll.
Very much was, sir. Yes.
He said
Yes.
windscreen, and that's instantly where my mind
It's
went.
mine too. As soon as I heard about the folks going through several windscreens on their new Defender.
Windscreens and transmissions.
The fun thing, of course, the transmission is not Land Rovers.
Nope.
And I don't know any brand in the automotive world of contemporary vehicles that has not experienced manufacturing or software teething. You guys take automotive news. In the number of recalls and the number of vehicles being recalled routinely, and the warranty claims on all of them are much too high. But vehicles are much more complex now.
Absolutely. But as for a brand that has had reliability issues and you're trying to grow, and it's tough to shake the feeling, I think, for especially new folks coming in.
A tip of the cap to journalist Richard Truitt for Automotive News, who covers JLR brands for Automotive News, who had a feature story in the last issue focused on our sister brand Jaguar, noting that the unmentioned change that Jaguar has to do, regardless of style, regardless of focus and marketability, is reliability.
I need to pause you, Jeff, because it's now time for us to change our names and put on our party dresses, because we're now going to talk about Jaguar rebrand.
Time for some gender bending, is that it?
Time to extinguish our gas-flamed heat.
Time to copy nothing. It's a good little transition. Thank you for that. Speaking of reliability, and also speaking of rebranding, Land Rover did this in 2013. Still spicy about it. I'm still going to mention it again because it's worth mentioning that on the anniversary of Land Rover's 75th birthday, they announced the Land Rover name was going away and they were changing everything. They did the same. Harold didn't tell me that there was a birth date or any sort of significant date associated with this, but they did announce.
They did it on a significant date. They just did it.
And what JLR did was come out with a rebrand of Jaguar, completely changing everything. They called a copy nothing.
Yeah, they gave the Growler some rat poison. They shot the Leaper. They got rid of all their iconic logo stuff.
Yes, they did.
So if you can think back about 8 years or so, when Ralph Spake was the CEO of Jaguar Land Rover, he believed and convinced the board, the company and its parent, Tata Motors, that Land Rover and Range Rover needed to be in each market niche, from relatively affordable models for Range Rover and Land Rover right up through the ultra luxury. And that put tremendous manufacturing pressure on Land Rover to actually have the capability of producing enough of each model, and then put pressure on the marketing people to sell enough of each model and make it worth it. With the changeover, when he stepped down, the board seems to have decided that Land Rover's thrust or JLR's thrust should not be filling each niche, but select the niche of product where they feel they could be the most successful, and then move aggressively in those areas. So Jaguar used to have a Jaguar model for sort of different price points or size points, right up to creating both, keeping the sports cars alive, keep creating the F-Pace, moving electrically with the I-Pace and E-Pace, and then keeping 3 different sedan levels in size and in cost. None of that worked as successfully for Jaguar as it did for Land Rover, but Land Rover in turn, as a JLR, as a board, really said, no, we're going to focus on certain niches where we know we can be successful, make more profit per vehicle, and then produce fewer vehicles. They're less concerned with being a volume manufacturer. So Jaguar made a strategic decision that nothing we were doing was really capitalizing well. And the F-Pace, while successful in terms of numbers for the US market, wasn't necessarily feeding people into Jaguar sedans. So the question is, which portion of the market should they go after? And with great sadness to me as a fan of the Jaguar brand, Jaguar has decided that it should compete with everything from Aston Martin to Bentley rather than necessarily to BMW. We are seeing the elimination of all the gas-powered models. We are seeing the end of the attainable Jaguar sedan, and they were always obtainable. They're never inexpensive in the US, but they were attainable. They were aspirational and attainable, and they're gone.
Well, they represented a great value. Yeah, they were not necessarily cheap, but you got a lot for what money you put into it. Even if you spent a lot of money, you got even more for what you spent.
Suited beautiful engines, beautiful machining. Again, the same electrical problems that lots of people had, but Jaguars, as they turned to electronics for emission controls and the like, which really did hinder things. And they made their vehicles more complex than they could probably handle. But that being said, they've now chosen to make an all-electric model lineup. Maybe there'll be 3 of them at some point, 3 different models in terms of an SUV, a sedan, and maybe a sports car again, all electric. I don't know how Jaguar takes on, if you will, this ideal of a startup when it's a 70-year-old company.
I think that's why you come out with the ad that they did.
I think so, yeah.
My big problem is not necessarily that they're changing the number of models or how they're powered or even some design issues. Mine is they're just as they are seemingly have done with Land Rover is let's forget about anything that brought us here. Let's forget about the past. Let's completely destroy, that's my word, destroy the past.
Well,
and start
copy nothing, as they say.
Copy nothing. And that not recognizing and respecting heritage, I think is really my problem.
Yeah, it's like it's a startup company that just happens to have acquired the name of another company that was successful.
And maybe that's the way they have to look at it in order to sell it. It does seem to me as they are assuming that nobody who has been a Jaguar supporter, and they're not huge numbers, but they're out there. They have marque aficionados, just Land Rover has marque aficionados. They're just letting them go.
Which is the same strategy they had with the Defender.
I'm not certain they actually had that.
Jerry himself said that he doesn't care about the people who like the old Defender because they already bought theirs. We're after new people.
But he's not saying that there are no qualities of the new Defender that we're carrying forward from them.
Okay. All right. Yeah, you're right there.
And the reason that I discovered that Jerry McGovern actually has his own press person assigned to the design office, in other words, JR Public Relations in the UK, it was Jerry who, at the New York Auto Show, said to a group of us journalists out loud that clearly the Discovery 1 and 2 never saw a wind tunnel. He was touting the new generation Discovery at the time. Now, usually you don't disrespect your previous models so public.
Jerry does.
He did and got away with it. It was okay.
Jerry gets away with a lot of stuff that he shouldn't because his stuff sells.
Because it works. He has the right to. He's achieved it. It's simply that I didn't see gargantuanly better cafe averages out of the new generation Defender 5 than I did out of the LR4.
Even though the D5 saw a wind tunnel.
Yeah.
As we're thinking here, I realize I think I've said 2 contradictory things, and I'm going to try to clarify it here. On the one hand, talk about how Land Rover and Jaguar both have a reliability problem, and it's tough to overcome that with the general public. And then I'm also saying I dislike that Jaguar is rebranding to get past that historical problem that they have. I'm not sure how I reconcile that in my head. I guess that's one way if you want to start fresh with the public that is not familiar with Jag because there's some sort of people in having their head that they're not reliable vehicles or they're very expensive. Rebranding and cutting off everything he did in the past is one way to do that. I hold those 2 things in my head and I apologize.
No, I think, John, what you highlighted a reason to indeed rebrand. There's not much commonality between the person looking for a high-end, luxurious electric vehicle. Why connect it with a past that which you really can't point to? About the only thing you could really point to as commonality would be the ability for handling. In other words, Jaguars were always brilliantly handled sedans. They could be wonderful on the road, and on-road comfort and competence that you always felt in a Jaguar.
Keep their three buzzwords from the 50s: grace, space, and pace.
Yeah, well done.
They can recycle that stuff easily.
Like that stuff, yeah.
And if they really want to be serious about being high-end electric, go after their tradition of being the fastest production vehicles. They could be the fastest production electric vehicle.
And I think that's where they're heading with their implications of 1,000 horsepower equivalency. It'll be interesting to see. It's simply, it's hard for me to reconcile what was an enthusiast vehicle with this high-end electric. I don't know that you build enthusiasm yet. Maybe they can do it. I wish them luck, to say the least. I don't want to see the brand disappear.
You said the magic word, yet.
Right. It's early. I guess I'm just very thankful that I'm not one of the 80 dealers in the U.S. who have agreed to take on the Jaguar franchise.
Yeah, because if they're only planning on selling a couple hundred, 80 dealers seems like way too many.
No, they're still talking fairly reasonable production numbers. I think they can dig into and get ahead. Tesla doesn't yet really have a luxury version. So I think they're looking at saying we can do that. John, you've probably seen the same. The Range Rover order sheets for the electric Range Rover, quite full.
Yes. Around the world, they have a very large backlog on those. Yes.
And the question there is, how much will the electric Jag cut into the Range Rover numbers if you're talking about exclusivity in electric vehicles?
But I don't know how many. This is what I've heard from JLR overall. Most Range Rover owners have multiple vehicles.
Okay.
It's one of a few that you have. It doesn't necessarily have to be your exclusive one.
That's true of series trucks and Defenders, too. You have to have more than one.
Different reasons.
But for different reasons, yes, exactly. And usually
Not
those
because you can, but because you have to.
And we usually have one that's not a Land Rover just because it's probably the one that will start up if we needed to.
Because that's just a prudent idea.
Which is why I've turned to the well-regarded Triumph TR7 and the Triumph Spitfire as my alternative vehicles.
Nice.
The only real other thing is Jaguar is going to require quite a bit of a new investment capital. And I hope it doesn't cut into the capital available for Land Rover.
I think we all want to see it continue. We don't want to see it go away, just as we don't want to see Discovery go away. But it should also get the appropriate attention it deserves. Did want to make mention for Jaguar, there is infinity for it if Pittsburgh is any indication, because every year, I know we talk about this all the time, Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix, but every year I'm always amazed at the number of Jaguars that show up. Maybe that's the only time they're driven every year, but there seems like there's hundreds of them. There's not that many, but it seems like there's hundreds of them. So there is still, I think, quite the enthusiasm for Jaguar, and I'd hate to see it. I hate to see it go away, because that is something that has brought something good to the motor industry.
I think there's perhaps even more Jags than Land Rovers at the Vintage Grand Prix.
You are correct. No, that's without question, Harold, without question. I think there's more XKEs than there are Land Rovers.
And I will echo at the British Invasion, the 500 to 600 vehicle event in Stowe, Vermont every year. There is always an enormous Jaguar turnout, from sedans right on through the sports cars. They are much been appreciated by the aficionado.
Well, that's something to appreciate. There is an increase in the number of enthusiasts into Land Rover. There's been more clubs added into the Land Rover community here in North America. That's all been positive.
I agree. And it is amazing to recognize that just as series Land Rovers struck the interest of so many enthusiasts today by virtue of their appearance in television and movies back when series vehicles were unusual in those. Two, for enthusiasts who grew up in the 80s and 90s, particularly 90s, when you saw the first NAS Defenders, when your family saw or purchased the Discoveries, which took you to school and to college and to trade schools, et cetera, and became your work vehicle in some cases. Those imprints made enthusiasts out of so many younger generation owners right now. And it's to the full credit of the brand that it's been able to keep that interest going. That's why we see so many Discoveries, Range Rover, P38s, even L322s at events. And we see them driven by people who clearly weren't drivers at the time they were new, just by age. And what a lucky break for the enthusiast community that these vehicles are still around and still reminding you of what great times you had in them with your families and friends.
Absolutely. It's good to see the energy being replaced by those that we've lost over the year.
And John, if I could, to thought of who we've lost, one of the more amazing aspects of the Land Rover community is the range of people who are Land Rover enthusiasts. I'm sure they're out there, but I've never met a Land Rover enthusiast who in effect says, I work at Dunder Mifflin as a middle manager. Extraordinary things, and in a wide variety of fields, from growing the finest of beef cattle to surgeons, world-class surgeons, writers, artists, real estate people who really love buildings, not just selling them, but love buildings.
Architects,
a great one. It's extraordinary to me what range is out, and that speaks to the health of the Land Rover enthusiast community overall. Certainly, as age captures time, we have lost some significant people, but at the same time, Land Rover's capabilities and its brand imagery keeps invigorating new people to take it on. At the memorial service for Rover's magazine columnist Dave Sweetapple, who died suddenly and tragically in August, the range of people who were at his memorial service in Brattleboro, Vermont, from all over the East Coast, and the tributes to him in the music world. David was a very accomplished musician, a punk rock musician. And to read those tributes, I had no idea how important he was to people who don't even know that he necessarily was a Land Rover enthusiast. And the range of people who were there and meeting them was extraordinary to have. I'm confident that's the situation for so many enthusiasts who over time we lose, but we gain so much in return from our newcomers to the Land Rover community. And thankfully, they are as enthusiastic and as invigorating as imaginable. It's a real bonus for us.
You mentioned something that got my attention, Jeff, when you're talking about seeing young people driving in vintage Land Rovers that are clearly older than they are. And you know what I call that? Good parenting.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's great, Harold.
Dave Sweetapple, I didn't know him personally, but he was important to Rover's North.
Dave was a genuine Land Rover enthusiast. His first connection with Rover's magazine came as a customer of Rover's North. And Dave lived in southern Vermont in the border town of Brattleboro, opposite end of Vermont, where Rover's North is located. But Dave also did something extraordinary that a great performing musician, which he was, would do. And that is the ability to connect people, in his case, through his music, secondarily, through his Land Rover enthusiasm. The folks who became members of Vermont Rovers were people who didn't necessarily live in Vermont at all. He didn't care. Vermont Rovers to him was a symbol, a theme, not a geographic location. He had Vermont Rovers members in Iran, in Turkey. The Rovers Magazine Instagram account was managed by Dave, and we suddenly found people connecting with Rovers Magazine, largely through the website, because Dave drove them there with his interest and his welcoming nature. Nobody had to pass any kind of test other than, I like your decal, I'll put it in my car. That was enough for Dave to become a member of the Vermont Rovers. So Vermont Rovers became an idea, not a geographic location. When Dave decided that there should be some kind of gathering, he called a restaurant friend of his who knew which premier hot dog would be served at the Vermont Rovers Weenie Roast. And people came from hundreds of miles away for a hot dog, just a hot dog in a field with dozens of people. The event was always oversubscribed in terms of expectation because people just wanted to be around other enthusiasts with that shared common interest in looking at our vehicles, seeing our vehicles getting together.
And I have a hard time going across town for a hot dog.
Most of the time, there's good reasons to avoid a hot dog. But I will say, Dave's restaurant friend was dead on. These are really terrific hot dogs. But the fact that he brought people together over a hot dog.
That is the definition of community.
That, John, is exactly it. You do not need to have fancy catered finger foods at Land Rover events.
Or an RTV course.
Or an RTV course. You just need Land Rovers.
And the people that drive them.
And the people that'll drive them there, exactly. Tip of the cap to Dave, and a huge thank you to those who are keeping the Vermont Rovers spirit going in that Vermont Rovers organization. We'll be keeping the column going. Vermont Rovers, because it's going to be taken over by a different member of that connected organization, loose organization. And we'll keep it going as long as we can. The spirit lives on. And that's due to Dave and his counterparts who passed on and made such a huge impact on Land Rover enthusiast organizations nationwide.
Jeff, I think that's a great way to end this year in Rover. I think what you said was very eloquent and well said, sir.
As usual.
Thank you very much, Harold. Thank you, John. Thank you for what you guys do to keep the Land Rover community connected through your podcasts. I certainly don't underestimate the amount of effort that goes into each one, but it is wonderful to have that discussion going on through my earbuds when I'm working. It's great to hear. Keep up the great work, and please have a very successful and safe and happy Christmas time and New Year to you both. Thank you.
And same to you, sir. And thank you for what you've done for the community, because there's a lot of work involved in getting the magazine together and writing the articles and going to the events and keeping in contact with everybody. Thanks, and a shout out to you.
Thank you for the compliments. Appreciate it.
And a happy New Year and Merry Christmas to you, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Harold, take care now.
Bye, Jeff.
Look, a thank you to everyone who's been on the podcast, who listens to the podcast, and who supports the Land Rover community.
We hope you enjoyed show number 141 for December of 2024. We want to thank Jeff Aronson for coming on once again, our annual Fireside Chats with Jeff Aronson, editor of Rovers Magazine. And be sure to go out to Rovers Magazine and get your free subscription if you have not already. We'll have a link, of course, to that in the show notes. And as the year comes to a close, at least the calendar year comes to a close, want to thank each of you for coming on the podcast, guys. I always do appreciate it. Harold, Morgan, Dixon coming on. And so thanks, guys, for coming on the podcast. Is there something interesting, something good happened this year you want to bring up, mention?
Been an interesting year. Let's see, 4 rallies, Winter Romp, Blacker Than Night, Birthday Party, Guy Fawkes. Couldn't do the Mar. It sold out in minutes, it seems.
It was minutes. Yes.
Of course, there was a 6-7 week hiatus in May and June when I was over in England and France dropping paratroopers out of a D-Day veteran airplane, and on Germany, actually. let's see, Rover-wise, Ravis didn't travel that far. Some of the challenge has been dealing with a windshield that is inspired. I guess the Rover engineers were inspired by 19th century picture frame makers, where the new Defender, what's the windscreen? You've got a monocoque body and you got a sheet of glass and some glue. This thing is 50, 60 parts at least. Take it apart and put it togetger again.
Yes, but how often does it crack?
This one doesn't crack.
Every time you turn on the heater.
What heater? Let's see. Rover-wise, I traded away an incomplete 1950 for a complete 1953, though.
Oh.
The challenge with this is complete in everything except the middle portion of the frame. It resembles a torpedoed Liberty ship right about now. But the rest of it's all there.
So are you going to fix the frame or just get a replacement chassis?
Oh, I have another chassis.
Oh, okay.
I have a couple of 80-inch chassis sitting around in stock, so it'll be rebuilt. And then I acquired another 1951, which is currently coming apart down in New Jersey. So down one Land Rover, up two. And I guess the last thing is the other aspect of the hobby, which is the Ottawa Valley newsletter. That was 684 pages of newsletter this year, 57 pages a month, which probably has at least a dozen or more pages of for sale articles or for sale things of series vehicles in North America. Though I do think for John, there were 2 NAS Freelanders advertised in there.
Woohoo! Well done. Well done.
Yes.
Yes.
The same one, just twice.
They wrapped it. It was a different wrap.
We have had that discussion on whether or not there's actually one working Freelander and it goes to Earl Scheib and gets repainted every so often.
Yeah. I think Joe at Lost Cause Ranch may have bought that one.
But let's see, 18,000 series vehicles imported in North America, and they sold 29,000 Freelanders. And look at the number of ads for each in the newsletter, because I will print every Freelander ad that I can find. It hasn't proven to be a burden yet.
And how do folks get a hold of the newsletter if they're not familiar?
The fastest way to see what it is, go to the ovlr.ca website. You can join the club and get it automatically sent to you. There's an archive there of the newsletters going back from, I think it's up to 2022 or 2023, going all the way back to 1984. Go to the website and ask for a copy or join the club.
Dixon has definitely put my year to shame. I managed to go to one event, the Stowe British Invasion, which is great fun. I was really glad to have a vehicle finally in the show, although it was not a Land Rover.
It was vaguely British, however.
It was fake British, vaguely. It was let into the show. Yeah, British enough, apparently.
They didn't stop you.
They did not stop me. And there were many others like it. Yeah, it's at least nice to get out to that show. Looking forward to actually doing some wrenching in the next year, 2025. I have some wrenching plans on the series. I really want to get that going again. So
do we need to keep prodding you? Would that help you?
Prodding always helps. It's never going to hurt, depending on whether it's an electric cattle prod or not. I would prefer not.
Fair. We will not physically prod you. We will just verbally prod you.
10-foot pole or something is fine.
In the podcast, what progress Morgan has made every month.
There we go. We have a special segment, Wrenching with Morgan.
And then mysteriously, he stopped showing up for the podcast.
I want to know how much stuff you're going to have to do over because it sat so long, partially finished.
It was mostly done with the disassembly, so there should be less to redo. But yes, there is definitely going to be a fair amount that has to be not redone, but refurbished more than originally intended.
You trying to get a place to work on it that's closer than the other end of Vermont?
Yes, I am. Yeah,
that would help.
Prices have not gone down since I started.
No.
Checked.
It's not just the fuel price, it's just the time it takes to go, and it's a disincentive. If it's close by, you get an afternoon, you can zip over and do a few things, but being so far away, you've got to plan for the whole day or multiple days to be able to do it, and then it just never seems to happen.
Yep.
And you get one of
I'm
those
not getting
portable
younger.
garages, Morgan. I've rebuilt two 109s underneath a Gatineau garage, which is one of those tarp things that we tend to go and have up here in snowy areas. Like plant one of those outside and put your series in there, and you have no excuses. You're 30 seconds away from wrenching.
And how sturdy are those?
Quite sturdy. You have to go after it snows, or during snowfalls, you go out there and bang on the roof to have it fall off the sides.
Well,
and then the piles that build up around it are insulation.
the only problem for Morgan is that he lives on a city street, and I don't think they would appreciate him sticking stakes in the tarmac.
It actually
And
depends. Up here, you're allowed to go and do that. Plant them right to the edge of the street. In some places in Quebec, the people plant them on the street and the plows just go around them.
Yeah, we actually aren't even allowed to park trailers on the streets in our city without a permit. And even those permits are only for summer months.
Car garage on the street, put permit on the side of it.
Sounds like you need to move, Morgan.
Yes.
Well, it hasn't been much of a year for me. I only made one event. Mind you, it was a great event. It was the Anarch Boosted Minnesota Land Rover's Picnic, now known as the North Star Rally. It's always been a great event, but it was even ever so much more so this year. And it was fun seeing people from other places, not just my friends in Minnesota. Other trips I was going to try and do ended up not happening because of scheduling conflicts. And then this fall, I injured myself and wasn't working for a couple months there, really. I really wasn't working for about 3 weeks. And then I was working one-handed for another month after that.
What'd you do to your hand?
That was collateral damage when I fell off the ladder. I sprained my wrist.
Oh, that's, I think you did mention about falling off the ladder. Okay.
Yeah, it was a pretty spectacular event.
Yeah.
And I'm laying there and rebooting and doing a systems check, and nothing's broken. And while I'm going through the inventory of things, I'm thinking, okay, I am now exactly the age my father was when he did something stupid on a ladder, and he was in a hospital for 2.5 months and off work for another 3. And I really can't afford that. So I came out of it pretty well, all things considered. But yeah, it really screwed up all my plans for this fall and missed out on a chance to do some family stuff. Actually, just a couple of weeks ago in Mexico for a family wedding. I didn't end up getting to go because, number one, my situation, and number two, in an unrelated event, my wife fell off a ladder and broke her foot.
Oh.
So she can't go anywhere, and she's in one of those boot things. Yeah, and this little town was all cobblestones and rounded cobblestones and up and down. It was a place where if you want to go anywhere, you really need a Land Rover.
Yes.
So her being on foot would not have worked, and it was just a bad thing. So we had to bail on that. So yeah, I haven't gotten to do much at all this year.
Wow. Sorry to hear about
And even
it.
less wrenching than you normally would get.
Yeah, it wasn't like I was busy working either the whole time. Mostly, but yeah, there was a period where I was either not wrenching or I was wrenching one-handed, which I'll tell you sucks.
Was it your dominant or not dominant hand?
Yes.
Someone's ambidextrous.
Yes.
No, I like to say my hands identify as non-binary.
Fair.
Nice.
Fair. There you go. Cool. How are you now? Are you feeling better? Are you 100% or close to it?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Pissed off, but otherwise, doing okay.
Understandably so. Yes.
I do that your hands are non-binary and yet digital at the same time.
Actually, they're digital
Oh.
and analog at the same time.
That's very true. For me this year, I spent almost a whole year now in a LR3 and
it still runs.
It still runs. I've thrown $1 million at it. Yeah, some things have happened, but I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the LR3.
You'd have to spend that much money on it.
Yeah, exactly. Paid for it. New tires, new brakes, usual oil changes, and then the electronic parking brake seized, and that required a flatbed over 45, what's that, about 40 miles over to Land Rover South Hills here, and a AAA tow, because it could still run, but it was just easier because I have AAA. Let's flatbed it over.
And you have
to
the good AAA that'll take you 100 miles if need be.
Yes, and actually I have the AAA better, which has the 200-mile tow.
You got that after you got your other Defender that you had to double up on your 100-mile tows.
Exactly. That's right.
Tow it 100 miles to a friend's house, let it sit for a week, and then tow it to my shop.
Yep, exactly.
Whatever gets the job done.
The secret 200-mile tow, they go, oh, we see you've used a 100-mile tow. Would you like a secret 200-mile tow? Yes, pay us extra money. The electronic parking brake motor, apparently that LR3 has seen some water for a period of time.
Really?
Yeah. There's a good bit of rust underneath, and apparently the water got into the motor of that electronic parking brake, and it seized it up. So that
Never thought the electronic parking brake was all that good of an idea.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Anyway, so that got repaired, and it's been fine since then. That's been about 2 months now, maybe a month. I don't know. Time blends together. But it was broken at a bad time, though, because it didn't allow you to take it to the GAR. Thank you, sir. Yes, I was getting an oil change right before the GAR, and then literally on the way to the shop to get the oil change, I went to release the parking brake, and you hear this grinding noise. That's when they found that out. So I ended up driving the 1,000 miles each way in the Jetta. But had a good time at the GAR. It was a fun event. And I also had a good time at the Pacific Coast Rover Club, had their Pacific Coast rally. That was a lot of fun also. Flew out to that one and had a great time.
Of course, the upshot of driving the Jetta instead of the LR3 down to Alabama is that you saved enough on fuel to pay for the parking brake fix on the LR3.
Yeah, I think you're about right, Harold. I think you're right. I think you're right. Yes.
Yep.
I got close to 40 miles per gallon diesel. Yep, there and back. That's absolutely right. Absolutely correct. But
versus what, 12?
I can get 15 in the LR3, 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's actually.
And I imagine that you don't drive it any easier than you drive your other vehicles. So that's quite impressive.
That's a polite way of saying John's hard on stuff.
I don't come off the line as I do in some other vehicles. I will say that in the LR3, unless I have to. Okay. And there are times when, especially in Western Pennsylvania, you do need sometimes to come off the line.
Yeah. It was more a comment on the way it's necessary to drive in the Pittsburgh area.
Thank you, sir, for putting that in such a polite way. Yes, exactly. Yes. There are times when you must do that. It's also interesting to go the difference when you drive the Jetta for a couple of days, then you go drive the LR3 for a couple of days. Being that high, upright position and being able to see things, and you're floating, and then the Jetta's like on the road, you feel every bump and you're so low.
I would think the bigger difference would be between driving the Jetta and driving the 109.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
they use the same fuel, but that's the only similarity because the whole methodology behind the clutching and the braking and the steering and everything could not be more different.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct.
True.
Yes. Although that frame replacement has been wonderful for the 109. It's very nice. It's quieter than the 110.
Now, that frame replacement also included suspension replacement,
yes,
correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
The parabolics.
Yeah. The parabolic springs make a huge difference. Yeah. And I did tell you that.
You did. Yes,
it's almost as good as coil sprung. And I think the reason it's quieter is number one, the suspension upgrades, but also soft tops tend to be quieter inside than hard tops. It's counterintuitive, but they do.
Because they're not reflective as much as the canvas is not reflective. Yeah, right. That makes sense.
Especially hardtop Land Rovers, like Series and Defenders, because their panels are just not designed in such a way.
Wait, stop there. They were designed?
Less noise.
They were designed?
Yeah. Remember with the stick in the sand on the beach?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That was a blueprint,
and especially
as I recall.
The Series 2 and 3 and Defender, they all had that fancy redesign.
If you've not already done so, listener, go out and check out the podcast art for this episode. It is my 110 dressed for the holiday season. And a final thank you to Pax for his continued production support. Pax got COVID this past month, so hopefully he's feeling better. Thank you, Pax.
Sucks to be him.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, that's no fun.
No fun.
As long as he's been helping us, and he did come down the one time, and he drove the 109 to the British Grand Prix. We've never had him on the show. We should get him on for a few minutes.
Okay, good. We'll do that. That'll be something we'll do in 2025. That's a good idea. And he has left Roverdom, though, so this could be an opportunity to also persuade him to get back into
So he
Roverdom.
needs to be on the show so we can ridicule him.
Yes, I like it.
Prod.
Prod, yes, not ridicule. Prod, verbally, not physically.
All right, I'll charge the batteries on my prod.
We post a new podcast at the end of every month. Our website, CentreSteer.com, has all our shows you can listen to and show notes with links to the stories we discussed in today's podcast and more. You can directly support the podcast at patreon.com/CentreSteer. You can buy a t-shirt, sticker, or even a tea/brown water. It's also available off the links on the website. Thank you for listening this past year. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover.
On behalf of the entire North American crew, all of which are here today, we would like to thank you all for listening. We know you have a choice when it comes to your podcasting content, and we do appreciate your choosing us. Please take a moment to look around you for any personal items you may be leaving behind, especially in the overhead bins. Remember, some items may have shifted during the show. Please watch your step as you slide down the Festivus pole, and you may now resume your important things.
I have grievances with you people.
Feats of strength come first.